All right, everyone, I have a really cool video tutorial for you all where we're going to be trying to build out this photo album using Next.js and Cloudinary. So I want to walk you through everything that we're going to build in this tutorial. I do think there's a lot of good information here that you can learn if you watch through this video. First thing is we have this gallery, right? So you have all your images here. And if I wanted to add a new image, you can go over here and click this upload button. And since we are using Cloudinary for the image upload, they have a nice widget that allows you to upload from your desktop. You can actually upload from various URLs and all these other integrations. I'm gonna go ahead and just upload something from Unsplash. And let's just go ahead and find like a horse or something. Okay, that one looks pretty good. Let's just go ahead and upload that. And after you do that, you'll notice that the horse does pop up in your gallery. Something cool about the uploading though is that Cloudinary has built-in add-ons where when you upload an image, it's going to run that through artificial intelligence and tag various objects that it sees in the upload. So for example, we just uploaded an image of a horse. If I were to type in horse here, notice that we can filter by that tag, and this was automatically figured out when I uploaded the image, right? So I also have some cats that were auto tagged. I think if I do dog, that shows up. That's a pretty cool feature that's built into Cloudinary as an add-on. The more features that we'll have in this application is you can actually heart various images, right? So if I were to heart, the top three here, the dog and the cats and the horse, if I go to my favorites, those will now be showing up in my favorites list. And all of this, I will say, is done without any database. I'm not using any database. I'm purely using Cloudinary's API. This more specifically is using Cloudinary's tagging feature. So I'm tagging these images with a favorite string, which allows me to go and filter through them with the Cloudinary API. Pretty cool. So we also have the ability to add things to albums. So if I were to go over here and click on this horse, I can actually click add to album. We get a nice little dialog that pops up. I'm gonna go ahead and say outdoors like this and click add to album. And now when I go over to the outdoors album, you'll see that the horse pops up over there. So this is done using Cloudinary's folders, where basically you can add a prefix to your image ID, and that'll kind of behind the scenes put in a different folder. And we're just using that for albums. And over here, we can kind of go through our different albums like this. Scuba doesn't have anything. All right, another cool thing I want to show you is if I click on edit, that'll take us to an edit page where we have access to filter this image using a various Cloudinary transformations, right? So for example, if I want to blur the image, all I have to do is basically use a pre-made Next component that Cloudinary provides us, where you can do various image transformations with very, very little effort. So we got blurring, we got converting to grayscale, we got pixelate. We have removing the background, which probably wouldn't work very well on this image. It'd probably work better on a different one. So I'll show you that in a second. But we also have a cool generative fill, right? Cloudinary has the ability to use AI to add objects and remove objects from images. And also we have the ability to add in more stuff to the left and the right if we wanted to. So for example, if we wanted to add in a shark to this image, let's just go ahead and try doing that. Notice that it took the image, it expanded the width of the image, and it started to add in various sharks. I will say that the generative fill is beta, so it's not going to work perfectly, but it is still pretty cool that you can easily do this just by basically using a built-in component and adding a very specific keyword to have it fill out various ways. I do want to demo the remove background though, so let's go back to our gallery and we're going to go ahead and try to find a cat image. How about this? And we're going to click remove background here. And there you have it, the image with the background removed. And if I were to open this in a new tab, you'll see that it doesn't have any background here. And that is what we're going to be building in this tutorial. So before I dive into this tutorial, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by Cloudinary. Cloudinary has a bunch of APIs you can use to basically handle your media, so images and videos. As you saw with my overview, they have various add-ons you can set up to auto tag things that you upload them, remove background, to do generative fill, you can do color changing. And they also have a really nice documentation that kind of explains everything that you need to know with using their API. They have various ways that you can interact with their service. In our case, we're going to be using a Next plugin, which has a bunch of pre-built components. So we have an image component here, we have an upload widget. They also have a video player. So if you haven't heard of Cloudinary before watching this tutorial, I think you'll be very impressed with all the features that they provide you with their service. And as far as technologies outside of Cloudinary, we're using Next.js 13 using the app router with React Server Components and Server Actions. And then for the components, we are using Shadcn UI, which provides all of these components that you're seeing while we're going to build out this application. So if this is something that you think would be really interesting to watch me build, and maybe you can learn something from watching it, be sure to stick around. Other than that, let's just go ahead and get started and start with a brand new project. All right, so we are going to be using Next.js in this tutorial. So let's just go ahead and get started with that. Down here, I'm going to click on this copy link, and then I'm going to go to a VS Code terminal, and we're going to call this Cloudinary Photos app. Go ahead and get that set up. I'll say yes. And then we are going to be using TypeScript. We will use ESLint, Tailwind CSS, yep. Source directory, yes. App router, yes. And would you like to customize the alias imports? I'll say no. Second thing I'm going to do is I like to always have all my code in new repositories. So I'm going to go to my repositories on GitHub. I'm going to create a new one, and we're going to name it the same thing that we did with a project. So I'll say Cloudinary Photos app. And we're going to go ahead and make sure that this is MIT, and I'll keep it public. Let's create that repository. Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and just click on this repo link because we're going to set it up to the code that we just set up. All right, so let's open up that Cloudinary project that we just created with the Next CLI tool. And let's just go ahead and make sure that if we do a git status, this is a git repo. But if you look at the git remotes, you'll notice that it's not linked to anything. So I'm going to go ahead and say git remote add origin, and I'm going to type in that link to that repo that we just created. And then I'm going to go ahead and just commit everything. I'll go ahead and do a force too, so that'll be over there. So let's just make sure if I refresh this page, we have our code that has been pushed to our repo. And as we're developing on the app, you guys can kind of just like go through the commits or just kind of look at this stuff when it's finished if you need to. The link will be in the description of the video. All right, so let's make sure we can run this. I'll say npm run dev, and that should host our Next.js application at port 3000. I'm going to go ahead and command click that. And now we have our Next app running locally. Awesome. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is, since we have a Next.js project set up, Cloudinary provides a bunch of helper utility widgets and components that you can use in your Next.js application. So they have kind of like first-class support for Next.js, which is really good. Let's just go ahead and copy this npm install command. I'm going to go ahead and just run it in another terminal down here. And while that's installing, let's move on to step 2. It says add the following variable to your .env local or .env. So I'm going to go ahead and make a .env because I don't have one. And we're going to copy in this environment variable. So for your cloud name, you actually log in to your Cloudinary dashboard and go to get started. You'll see that you have this area over here that tells you different ways to basically integrate with various languages. They have React, Angular, JS, Python, PHP. But if you look here, there is a cloud name here that's hard-coded to the string. I'm going to go ahead and copy this string, and I'm going to put it right here. Secondly, we need to make sure this git ignore is updated so that we don't have that .env there. So I'm going to say .env just so that we don't accidentally commit that, because we might have some secret variables that we never want to get committed to our Git repo. All right, so scrolling down, there is a couple of components that they give you out of the box. We are going to be focusing on just using the upload button for right now. And basically, we want a way to upload images to Cloudinary. Cloudinary, like I mentioned before, is a place to store all of your media files, and they give you tons of different utility functions behind the scenes to do filtering on those, to do image processing on those, object detection, machine learning, AI, various things. So what we're going to do is, if we're trying to build a Next.js application for managing our photos, it makes sense to start with uploading a photo. Okay, so let's just go ahead and import this widget. And notice down here it says if you're using Next 13 app directory, which we are, it says you must add use client directive at the top of your file. So let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to try to find the main index page, and we're going to simplify this a little bit. All the stuff we're seeing now is basically the stuff that was given to you when you spin up a Next.js project. But we're going to kind of reduce it to the bare minimum needed. I'm going to import this, and then I'm also going to say use client for right now. As we progress later, you might want to actually have this be a React server component, and you could have smaller subcomponents be the client, but it's kind of easier just to put use client at the top right now for this entire page. So let's verify if we were to use this button somewhere. Let's just go ahead and copy that entire snippet. Let's go and paste that right here. All right, so if you notice here in the upload component, there is an upload preset that we actually need to set. So right here, this is just defaulted to some replace me value. Let's go over to Cloudinary's console and let's try to find those upload presets. So down here, there is a settings gear cog. Go ahead and click that. And if you go to upload over here, you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that you have a bunch of different upload presets. One is called ML_default. That's kind of the default when you set up an account. But different upload presets basically allow you to specify what gets attached to your images when you upload them. So for example, you can like define tags and other things. But for this example for right now, let's just go ahead and allow anyone to upload images to our Cloudinary Media Store. I will click add a preset name. And if you see here, it says set to unsigned to enable unsigned uploading to Cloudinary with this upload preset. I'm going to say unsigned. Again, you probably want to do signed if you want to prevent various people from just uploading things to your media store. But we're just going to kind of do the bare minimum for right now to get this working. There's also a bunch of other configurations you can kind of click through. But for right now, let's just use the default. Another cool thing you can do is as people are uploading images, you can run those through machine learning algorithms to basically auto tag stuff. So for example, if someone takes a picture of their dog, you can have Cloudinary attach the dog tag to your image so that later on we can kind of view that tag. They have a lot of cool stuff. Here's another cool one. So when people upload images, you can actually have it invoke a webhook API endpoint if you wanted to. If you wanted to like notify people when people upload images or videos, that might be interesting. Various other things. I'm not going to cover everything that they support because they do have a lot of supported features. Let's just go ahead and click save. And we're going to go ahead and grab that preset and let's use it here in our upload widget here. So I'll go ahead and save that. And then going back to our app, let's refresh the page, do a hard refresh. And I should probably have my DevTools opened up so that nothing is getting cached. Okay, looks good. Let's click upload and notice here we get a nice Cloudinary widget that's built out of the box for us that we can use. You can upload files from your computer. You can actually specify like a URL and that'll take the image from the URL and pass it into Cloudinary. You can do camera, Google Drive, Dropbox, etc. I don't really have too many images on my computer, so what I'm going to do is do Unsplash, go ahead and connect to it, and let's just grab this cool image of a windy mountain road. I'll click next. And I'll click small, and hopefully when I click upload, that will be sent to our Cloudinary Media Store. Go ahead and click done. Cool, so how do we know if that actually worked, right? Our application doesn't really have any feedback. Let's go back to Cloudinary, and I'm gonna go to my media store. Over here, there's a media library. If you just go ahead and click this, zoom out a little bit, notice that that image that we just selected shows up as one of our assets, right? You click on it, you can actually add tags to it, you can view various things, give it a title. But the point is we successfully allowed people to upload images from their computer or from a remote data source and put that into our Cloudinary media library. All right, so that completes like the first part is how do we allow users to upload images into Cloudinary. Now let's look at some of the other components that they provide you when you're using Next.js. They have a Cloudinary image component, which you can use to point to your public IDs to display images. So let's just try that out. I'm going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to put this up here. We're also going to grab this widget and we will put it underneath here. So the public ID, that is going to be given to you when you upload your image. So if we go back to our asset here and click it, you'll notice that this is your public ID right here. You can copy it. And if I were to just hard code this right here, that should make the image display for us in our application. And there you have it. But that process, obviously you can't have users just go in and like get the public ID from clicking through your UI. What you're going to want to do is listen for when the upload completes so that you can get that ID. So let's go ahead and look to see if there's some type of property that we can use. Looks like there's an on upload. Let's just go ahead and do this and see what information we get back. Going over to their on upload callback, it looks like it's a function that gives you a result and a widget. Okay, so let's look at what result is. I'll go ahead and rename this as a result. I'm just going to go ahead and console log this. So we're going to go ahead and just play around with this and verify that if we were to upload a different image, go ahead and grab this hat one and click next. Go ahead and click small here, click upload, and here we go. We got an event back. Let's look at what we get back. We have info, and inside of info, we have an ID. Notice here we have the asset ID. There's also a public ID. Now they may have TypeScript types provided for this, this callback, but for right now, I'm going to show you something you can potentially do. I'm going to go ahead and make my own type, right? Sometimes you're dealing with APIs that do not provide you types. And this is something that actually happens when you're doing real life development. So let's just go ahead and make a type called like upload result. And we're going to go ahead and define an event here, which has what do we have down here? It has an info and an event. So info, and I think event, at least for right now, we know one is success. Okay. And then for info, we're going to just go ahead and put a public ID because that's all we really care about right now. You could potentially take that whole data structure and you could put that into a converter and give you the type, but we're going to start as simple as possible. Okay. And we're going to type this result here. And what this allows us to do is now we can actually say .result info.publicID and just go ahead and print that out. And we're going to verify that this works. So if I were to close this and if I were to go click done, let's actually try to have some state store that public ID so we can actually show that image using the widget later on. So let's just go ahead and make some state over here. I'll say const image ID and I'll say set image ID. Let's use state. Right now we're going to keep it as an empty string, but when the upload is complete, we're actually going to call set image ID and just set that public ID. And what we could do is just only display this if the ID is set, like so, and then we can use that inside a source here. And that should be good. We also changed the width and height of this stuff. So if I wanted to do like 400 by 300, we can do that. Let's just try this. We'll do upload. We're going to do a different image from Unsplash. This diver looks pretty cool. Go ahead and minimize this a little bit. I'll click next, click small. Go ahead and click done. And there you have it. So we've uploaded to Cloudinary. We got a callback, which gives us some information about the uploaded asset. We get the public ID, which is kind of used for knowing how to get that from Cloudinary CDN. And then we set that in state, and now the image is being displayed. Awesome. So baby steps, we're one step closer to having a working photo application. I mean, uploading is one of the main pieces of functionality, and showing images is another main piece of functionality. All right, so at this point you might be asking, why would we use the Cloudinary CLD image component instead of using Next built-in optimized image component? And one of the main reasons is Cloudinary provides a bunch of optimizations for you. So as you request the image, it'll automatically scale the image down and optimize it for your client. But another great benefit is that if you scroll down, you'll see that you have the ability to add a bunch of different filters and transformations to the image before it's sent over from Cloudinary. So for example, if you wanted to remove the background from the image, add a new background, and tint something, all you have to do is just add a couple of properties and you're good to go. So I did want to test that out. I uploaded this picture of this dog here, and I'm going to copy this public link here, and I'm going to default the state just temporarily to that public ID. Go back to our app and you see the dog show up here. And so like mentioned in the documentation, you can actually add a tint to this image. And let's go ahead and put that in here. And you will get a blue, green, purple tint added to the image before it gets sent over from Cloudinary, right? And that's kind of a cool, powerful thing you can do with the images, that you can actually just on the fly do various things with them, right? So if you go down the configuration, they tell you all the different things you can pass to the component to basically change where it focuses. For example, like you could pass gravity to have it focus on faces. Down here, we could blur it a little bit if you wanted to. You could blur faces. So let's try out blurring faces. Let's upload a new image, just one more, and we're going to go ahead and find one of a person. All right, maybe this person will work. I'll go ahead and upload this woman. And if I just go ahead and put blur faces here, notice that her face got blurred out. Now let's get rid of the tint here. And there you go. So with little effort on my side, I can start doing various image manipulations on the images that are hosted in Cloudinary. And it's really cool. I really like it. Feel free to like play around with this. You can say cartoonify, and then you've already applied a filter to the image. But I think that's a good enough demonstration of like the power behind all the different configurations. If you want to go through these examples, they have a bunch of cool stuff that you can do here. So right now our app looks kind of basic. Like what we could potentially do is bring in some type of component library to help, create headers, create buttons, drop downs, and stuff like that. One component library I like to use is Shadcn UI. It has a very minimal dark mode to it, but I believe you can customize it the way you want if you need to. All right, so let's go to installation. I'm gonna click Next.js, and I'm gonna go ahead and just run this command because this one I already have set up. This basically sets up your project for Tailwind and TypeScript. Let's copy the Shadcn UI command, go ahead and run that. Which style would you like to use? I'll say default. What color would you like to use? Guess we could try gray. I don't think I've tried gray or zinc. Zinc sounds like it might be pretty cool. Where's your global CSS file? We have app global CSS. Would you like to use CSS variables for colors? Yes. Where's your tailwind? Yep. Go ahead and do that. Where to configure components? Yeah, that's fine. Configure the alias. I'm just going to go ahead and do the defaults for everything. I think I accidentally put the wrong folder here. I'm going to copy all this and I'm going to replace global CSS real quick. Go ahead and delete that. All right, so you might ask, why do I like using Shadcn UI? Basically, it allows you to copy and paste components into your project, and you have basically full ownership over those components. So you can style them and customize them the way you want. I like that a little bit better over using a pre-built component library because it's usually very hard to customize a component library, such as like Chakra or Material UI. You're kind of stuck with what they give you. Versus this just gives you a way to basically add in a bunch of components. So for example, another thing I like about this is that you can actually view all the code that they did for building out this thing. So if I click view code, you'll see it takes me over here. I can go into the page and you can start seeing how they set up various things. So for example, the code for the top nav bar here, I think is right here. So I could potentially just grab this code and I can go back to our app. And inside a layout, let's just go ahead and add that in to the very top of the page because we want that to exist on every page. So I'm going to go ahead and paste all that in. And a lot of this stuff we can kind of comment out for right now. Maybe I'll bring it in a second. But if we do this, we go back to our app, you can see we do have the header. Now I did mess up dark mode. There is something that I think I messed up on. I'm going to go ahead and add source there. And then secondly, I'm going to add class name dark here so that it actually sets it to dark mode. All right, let's just go ahead and test this out. I'm going to say hello. And then over in this div, I'll say world. I want to see where these get spaced out. We got hello over here. We got world over here. All right. And now we're getting into Tailwind CSS stuff. So like if I wanted to basically make this thing stay within a container, notice how it, like as you zoom out, it goes all over to the far of the page. That's not the greatest for larger monitors. So we're actually going to wrap this thing inside of a container. And I'll say MX auto. And that should hopefully contain this stuff. So even if with bigger monitors, you'll see that it stays within like a normal realm of the page. So secondly, you'll notice that the border probably needs to be added to something else. So I'm actually going to put the container down one here. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So for hello, I'm actually going to put a logo. So I'll say like photos app. We can come back and add like a cool logo or something. And then behind my head, we have the world, right? So I might actually switch this over to the right so you can see this. So instead of putting world here, if you do have authentication, you may want to actually have like an avatar placed up there. So one thing you can do is search all the components that are available here. And you see there's one called avatar. And there's code here that tells you how to do that. Now, by default, we don't have a bunch of components with Shadcn UI, so you actually have to go and add them. So down here, if you click on this, you can add these in using the CLI tool. Go ahead and add that in real quick. We're going to add in the avatar component. And once you do that, you'll see that you have an avatar component pop up down here. So now we have access to using the avatar component. And if we look at the code, potentially just copy this. Now we'll place that in part of world here and just auto import some of the stuff. Make sure you import it from the right components directory. There you have it. You got a little avatar. So we may not do much authentication in this video. We're going to stick to just doing as much as we can, just kind of playing around with the Cloudinary API and getting some images up there. But I did want to have some type of component library going so that our app doesn't look terrible. So another thing that'd be interesting to do is on the left, we could have some type of side navigation where you can manage your photos. Maybe you can view different albums or something like that. So let's see if there is a side navigation. Okay, so something kind of like this, maybe that could be for more advanced side navigations. There's also some type of side navigations like this. I think this one looks pretty nice. So we might actually look at how they did this. Let's view the code and let's go to figure that out. So if we go to the components, I'm guessing they have a sidebar, okay? And in the sidebar, they have all the stuff necessary to kind of get this going. And we're not going to copy all this. We're just going to copy, I think, the bare minimum to get this going. They had a discover, and then they have this section with some divs. Let me do that. Let's just go ahead and grab that, and we're going to go and make a component up here for right now. I'll say function side menu, and I will return some divs. Now some things are missing, like cn is actually something we can import as a utility, and that's used for basically dynamically applying classes to various things. Technically, I don't think we need it for right now, so let's just delete it. And then we also have button. So button is another component that we'd have to install. So let's go over to components over here. Let's just search for button. Here we go. And we're going to go ahead and just add it to our project by running this CLI command. Very similar to how we did the avatar. Click yes, and now we have access to a button. So I'm going to go ahead and auto import this button. And then going back to our app, I don't think we're rendering anywhere, right? So let's just go ahead and make sure we render out this side menu somewhere. I'm going to go ahead and do that probably inside. I'm going to go ahead and just do that right here, side menu. And then over here, we can actually just have like different pages show up. We got a side menu. So if you're not really familiar with how like nested layouts work in Next, we have this layout here, and the page and all the components that are defined inside that page will be rendered inside of this children, right? So if we wanted the side menu to live to the left of this stuff, what we kind of need to do is we need to wrap it in some type of flex box. So I'm going to say div, and I'll do this. And then inside of here, I'll give this a class name, and we're going to say flex. And that should hopefully move the side navigation to the left. Now so right now this side menu it's a little bit big for my liking, so I'm going to try to find a way to reduce it just a little bit. That seems like a lot of empty space here. So what we could potentially do is inside a side menu, we can actually say width of 1/4 or something like that, and that'll reduce the size. If you wanted to do less, you could do 1/5. All right, so now that the nav bar is a little bit skinnier, I'm going to go ahead and try to rename some of this stuff because we're not really building a music app, we're building a photos app, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say manage instead of discover. And instead of listen now, I'm going to go ahead and say view images, or actually we can call it gallery. How about that? Down here, we can say, we'll say albums, maybe. And then down here, we'll do archive. Archive, like, so if you like delete a file or something, archive it for 30 days or something. Maybe we can call it like deleted. Then down here, we're going to say favorited or favorites. How's that? But we got some icons that don't really match the names of what we're going for. So the first thing that we're going for is gallery, right? So let's see if we can find like images maybe. There's photo. Let's just grab that. So we shall go over here and we're going to put that right there. Okay. Now the second thing we're looking for is albums. So I'll say like folder maybe. Paste in that. And then finally, we're going to do favorites, right? So, I mean, a heart is probably like the de facto for that. So let's just grab a heart and let's paste that in here. Now, there's obviously not enough space between the image and the text. So let's just go ahead and add some space between that. What we could potentially do is if you wanted to add a flex to this and a gap of 4, I think that's one way you can add space. 4 might be a little bit too much, so let's just do like a 2. Make sure that looks good. I think it looks pretty good. And then we'll do the same thing for the other buttons here. So I'll go ahead and add it there, and I'll add it here. All right, so we're going to focus on the gallery for right now, just a place to basically show all the images you have and allow users to upload images. Okay, so it makes sense to have maybe a title here that said like your gallery, and maybe an image, a button over here that says upload images. So let's go and try to make a gallery page. Now we haven't made a nested page here inside of the app router yet, but we're going to do that. We'll say gallery like this. And inside a gallery, I'm going to go ahead and just put a page.tsx. And I'll say export default function gallery page. I don't know. Yeah, it's with an E. For some reason, I'm calling it gallery with an A. So let me rename that gallery. And inside of here, let's just go ahead and return a fragment real quick. Awesome. So to verify if this works, what we could potentially do is just go to /gallery and verify that it shows our gallery page, and it does. So on the gallery page, what we're going to try to do is we are going to add that upload button and also a title. So let's just go ahead and give this maybe a section like that. And we're going to go ahead and add a H1 called gallery. And using Tailwind, we can kind of make this text be 4XL. Maybe we can make it bold. Okay. And then additionally, this could be some type of div that has a flex with space between, so that we have the H1 on the left, and then we also have an upload button on the right. So let's just go ahead and find that upload button. And we're going to actually copy that and put it over here. Right, and the logic will change a little bit for the on upload, so let's just comment that out for right now. But we could potentially grab the upload result from this page. I'm just going to export it for right now, but at some point we could probably like move that to a shared types file or something. Okay. So let's look at our app. Okay, let's see if it's going to work. I think it's breaking for right now. Let's figure out why it's breaking. Oh yeah, it's breaking because you cannot use this upload button unless you're in a client component. So again, use client, make sure you add that in. There we go. And I actually don't think it's called space between. I think it's called justify between. That'll space out. All right, so justify between was, I think, supposed to space these out. I think the issue is that this thing is not full width. So somewhere, either in the layout or somewhere else, we need to make the nested children full width. So here I'll say class name wfull, and that should hopefully make this full width. It does. And you can tell it's kind of a tight squeeze. There's no padding, so I might add some padding to the X and Y. So padding X could be 4, padding Y could be 2. Okay. Still not that much padding. I might actually say padding top to be 12 or something, just to bring it down. Anyway, that looks okay. Also, this button doesn't even look like a button, so we should probably go and make that look like a button in some way. Now, unfortunately, I think we have to keep this as a Cloudinary upload button. I don't know if there's a way to make a button. I think actually if we add as child to this, let's actually look at this real quick. Yeah, that's how you do it. All right, so basically I'm going to wrap this with a button from our buttons component. I'm going to add as child, and that's going to kind of swap this around so that this is actually acting as the button, and this is more of just a styling type of thing, I believe. I need to go and read the docs exactly how that works, but I do believe if you don't add this, I don't know if that's going to do the same thing. Yeah, you get a bunch of issues with that. So I'm going to go ahead and say as child and refresh the page, and notice that works fine. I kind of want to put a picture of an image or an upload, so let's go back to hero icons. So here, I'll say upload, and let's just grab this one. Looks pretty good. And inside this upload button, I think what we could potentially do is just put that JSX. Let's see what happens if we do this. Okay, that's gonna break that. So I'm gonna put a div here, and I'll actually say class name flex gap of 2. So that we have the icon, and then we also have the button over here. And I think That should fix it. Cool. At this point, this project's still just a work in progress. It's like a prototype, and we're slowly starting to evolve it and let it organically look good. I need to come back and actually make these links. I need to show images here. I think that could potentially be the next spot that we work on, is showing the actual images that we have in Cloudinary here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit everything we have, because we have made a decent amount of progress, and I want to kind of get all this stuff added at some point. So let's just go ahead and add it now, and I'll say working on gallery page. I'll go ahead and publish that up. And I'm also going to close out of all this. And I'll open back up the gallery page so we can kind of focus on that. All right, so now that we have the gallery page, I want to actually try to fetch all the images that are uploaded to Cloudinary when this page loads, or doing some type of an effect to fetch that. To achieve that, they have a search API. They also have an admin API that you can run some node code. So for our code to actually be able to invoke this, we'd probably have to run this in a React server component and pass that data down. Since this is more of like a dynamic thing, we could probably just make an API endpoint locally and invoke that. So let's try to use this, and we're going to try to convert our code a little bit to use React server components, so that when the page loads, we can actually invoke some backend node code to fetch this data and then display that in the UI. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to have to actually not use a use client here. Okay. Now, the only reason we have a use client was because we needed this button to basically work. Okay. So what we could do is we could make another component here like so, and I can just say upload button.tsx. Okay. Now this could be our use client, and we're going to go ahead and pull out, for right now, let's pull out all the code. And I'm going to reduce this all to just return a button here. Okay. Like so. And I'll say upload button. Okay. Does that make sense? And we're going to go ahead and use that in place of where we had it over here. Go ahead and delete that. And the reason, again, I'm doing this is because we need to be able to use the Cloudinary Next component, but it has to be inside of a client component, right? So if we move that to another place, that allows us to use this as a React server component, and we can actually fetch some data from the backend and have that passed down and render out stuff. So let's make sure our app still works. It seems like it's still loaded. That's good. Let's go to the search API, and we're going to try to copy this and use it. And what we're going to do is we're going to convert this to an async function so that Next can actually invoke some asynchronous code. I'm going to go ahead and run this code right here. And this is a promise, so we should be able to say const results is equal to await this. And we're going to go ahead and just try to fetch every image, right? We don't need to do tags, so we don't need to do uploaded days or anything like that, but we're going to do that. I haven't yet installed the Cloudinary package, so let's go down here and I'll say npm install Cloudinary. And that'll allow us to use this Cloudinary library to make requests to the Cloudinary API. Go ahead and import that like so. And we should be almost good. Now, what we need to do is we need to set up some environment variables. So if I go over to the setup, I'll go to node quick start. So we install this, we just did that. And this is saying that we need to set this as an environment variable. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this and put it in our .env. Like so. But we're going to have to put an API key in an API key secret and a cloud name. We have the cloud name right here, so we can just go ahead and paste that in. But the API key and secret we do not have yet. So let's go to the Cloudinary dashboard, and we're going to have to create an API key. So again, click on the gear cog down here, and let's go down to access keys. I'm going to go ahead and rename this one to Cloudinary Photos so that I remember to delete it later on. And then over here, I'm going to copy the API key, and we're going to put that right here. And we're going to also look at the secret and copy that. Put it right here. All right, so with that added to our .env, and again, I'll go and delete this after this video is made so you guys don't try to use my account. It's a free account anyway, so nothing much you could do with it. But if we go to the page that's trying to do this fetch request, that should hopefully do the request. So if I were to go ahead and log out this information, our Next API should fetch that information. You can see here we have a bunch of data that when the page first loads, it is going to fetch all of that. So looking at the data returned, we just need the public ID for right now. So I think we could just make a type here. I'll say type, and then we're going to just go ahead and say public ID, which is a string. Is there anything else that would potentially be useful here? I don't know if we have anything here that'd be useful. Again, we can always just like print it out and get it later. But I'm going to go ahead and just type this and say as an array of search results. Does that make sense? And what this allows us to do is when this page loads, we fetch the data. We're going to get 30 for right now. I'll just do like 5 so we don't like get too many images back. And then we need to loop over them. Okay, so let's just go ahead and say results.map, and I'll get a result. And we're going to return a div right now. But what we should probably do is actually return that Cloudinary image that we had on this page. So here, we can actually use this. I think this might have to be a client component. We'll find out in a second. I'm just going to go ahead and render that out. And we're going to go ahead and say result.publicID. And hopefully that works out pretty good. And I'm guessing this is red because we probably need to provide a key here. So I'll say result public ID as well. Actually, this is red because I put curly braces here. So let's delete the curly braces. That should make it happy. I'm going to try to import this, but no promises. This may not work. And I'm going to wrap this in a div so that we can actually put this in like a CSS grid. I'll say grid calls 4. And I'll do a gap of like 4 as well. Looks like we want to add an alt here, so I'll just say an image of something. Right now we don't really have an alt. All right, saying results.map is not a function. So I'm wondering if maybe I need to look at what was returned. It looks like it's actually this. We get back resources. So I actually need to do this. Resources is going to be that. This also has a next cursor. So if you need pagination or if you have like infinite scroll, we could add that in. But for right now, let's just save that. And we're going to go ahead and say results resources.map. Okay, so this is the error that I was afraid we're going to get. The reason this isn't working is because this is actually a client-only component. So we're going to have to set up another component over here. I'll just call it like Cloudinary image. And we're just going to do this so we can say use client at the top. And then we're going to say export function Cloudinary image. And we're going to cut all this out. We're going to return it, import that Cloudinary image. And this thing really only needs a public ID, which will be a string. So I might actually just delete this. Technically, it doesn't even need a key because we're not doing it inside of a map. There we go. And then obviously there should probably be some other properties that are passed in as well. So I'm going to say ... props. And we're going to go ahead and say ... props. Just so that you can actually pass in all these other things. So for right now, like we just need to pass in the source. Essentially everything else could be passed in. You know, to make this easier on myself, I'm actually just going to say props any. And I'm going to go ahead and just do this. There. Now here, I could just say Cloudinary image, and I'm going to go ahead and just pass in some of those same things that we had. So for example, we need a key, result.public ID. We need a source, result.public ID. And then this will complain without an alt, so I'll say an image of something. Technically, we should have a width and a height, maybe. Yeah, it's saying it's missing a width and a height. So let's just go add a width here. I'll say 400. Height could be also 300. Keep it kind of standard. And hopefully, we get some images. Awesome. So hopefully that wasn't too hard to follow. We basically install the Cloudinary package, set up a .env configuration so we can connect using our public and private keys. We do a fetch to get the images, and then we render those. We had to abstract this away into a client component so that Next doesn't yell at us, and then we display those. So let's do a little bit of of code refactoring here. So this thing should be at the top, but now it's getting squeezed down to the side. So what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and wrap these things in its own section or div. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and I'm going to put that here on this div like this. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, and then on this one, I'm going to say flex column gap of 8, just to space out the title and this upload button. So let's see if we can come full circle. So we have all these things displayed. I'm going to go ahead and just try to upload another image. I'm actually going to reduce this a little bit to like 10 images. There we go. I'll click upload, and let's see if we can just like, I'm going to try to upload one from my computer. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a screenshot. I'm going to click and drag that in. Go ahead and click done. And that should have uploaded it. But the issue is that we're not telling Next.js to like refresh the page. So if I manually refresh it, we should see that new image pop up. But that's not the best user experience, right? So what we want to do is after this upload button has finished uploading, I'm going to pass in an on upload. And we're going to just go ahead and force React to re-render. Or I'm sorry, we're going to force Next to refresh the page. So now that I think about it, we cannot actually do this here. We're going to have to do that inside the upload button itself, because unfortunately with React Server components, you can't bring in the router and tell it to refresh unless you're in a client component, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say const router is equal to use router and import that. And then down here inside of our on upload, we're going to say router.reload. And I actually think this is actually supposed to be called navigation, not router. When you're using the app router, you got to use navigation. I don't know why my auto import is bringing the wrong stuff, but I think you can say refresh here, and that should do it. Okay, so sorry for that. So let's try it again. If you go back to our app here, and let's just go ahead and try to upload an image from Cloudinary. Let's just try to upload an image from Unsplash. Let's just find a new one of cat or something. Let's just grab, that one looks okay. Click next, I'll click a format. I'll do a small, I'll click upload. Okay, and what that should have done is it should have reloaded my page, which it did not. I'm also just gonna put a refresh here, just so we can see if it prints out. It should, but just to make sure. And yeah, let's load up the console, clear this out, and let's try to find an image from Unsplash. Type in like cat. Go ahead and select this one, click next, that, click upload. And click done. All right, and the issue that these cats that we're adding are not showing up, I think it's because we're sorting by public ID. So that's kind of random, right? Depending on what Cloudinary decides to give, it's not going to give you what you want. So what we actually want to do is sort by something else. So I think there might be a created at, and we could say descending to give us the most recent thing that was created. And there we have it. So now the cats are showing up. I also noticed that you have to click this button in a very specific place. I think that's something I messed up on. Let's go to the upload button and let's see if we can kind of fix that. So I'm going to put this SVG probably inside of this button. I'm going to get rid of the div too. All right, and then I'm going to say upload. Okay, that's a little bit better. And then additionally, I'm going to go ahead and just get this flex gap of 2, space that out. If you all are new to this channel, you guys know that I like to do stuff live and I make mistakes and I like to fix them later on. So hopefully you guys are staying up with the speed with what I'm doing. So I fixed the upload button. I don't like how this thing is like higher. You see how the upload text is higher than the actual button. So another thing we could do is we could say items center. That should hopefully center both of them. And we're going to go ahead and click upload here, and we're going to try this one more time. I'm going to click unsplash. Do a pizza this time. Feeling kind of hungry, you know? Let's select a slice of pizza. I'll click next. We're going to do small, and I'll click upload, and hopefully this will refresh the page and we should see pizza show up. All right, so unfortunately, I think there might be some type of race condition going on where this is getting called before it's fully propagated to being queryable from the Cloudinary API. So this might be a little bit hacky, but I'm actually going to say set timeout, and we're going to actually defer this by about a second. Okay, so we're going to only refresh the page after a second has passed, and hopefully that's enough time for everything to be indexed inside the Cloudinary's API, and then the page will refresh and you'll see your image. You could also probably figure out a way to do optimistic updates so that it gets added directly after you add it. But sometimes just refreshing the page is the easiest thing. Let's just do an upload again. And when this is done, it's showing up. Okay, so not the best fix, but these are things that you actually encounter when you're building out software and you try to do quick little fixes to get it working. I'll have to come back in a little bit and try to figure out if there is a better way to do this. All right, we made some progress on the gallery page. I'm gonna go ahead and say show images on gallery page. So I think this is a good start to a gallery. I would like to maybe add like a load more button, which we could potentially add later on, or some type of like lazy scroll loading. Maybe the ability to delete images would be interesting as well. But I think what I want to work on now is the ability to favorite something, okay? So in order to achieve that, I think on these images themselves, we're going to have to add some type of like heart. And when we click on that heart, we're going to go ahead and mark it as favorited. Let's go to our Cloudinary image component, and we're going to try to add some type of heart overlay on this. I'm going to wrap this in a div. And hopefully that doesn't mess up the images at all. All right. And the reason I'm adding a div here is so that I can add a heart. So I'm going to add a heart icon, which I do believe we already have somewhere. We added that on the layout. We have an SVG for the heart. This one. And so that we don't like, copy and paste this SVG in two different places, let's just go ahead and make a components. And I'm going to go ahead and say icons. And let's just add one called heart.tsx. Export function heart. Return that SVG. Okay. So that's going to allow us to do this. And auto import that there. And that shows up. And what that allows us to also do is we can go to our component here, and I'll put a heart in this component as well. And now we see a heart down here. So what we're trying to do is we're going to take that heart and we're going to move it up to the top right of this parent container, right? So how you do that? Well, you can say class name is equal to relative. And then on the heart itself, we could provide a class name. I might have to pass that through. So I'm going to go ahead and just say props any, and I'm going to go ahead and just say ... props. Now there's a better way to type this rather than putting any. I could say component props and then type in the element type. So here's an example, component props div. Let's go back to our code and hopefully do this the right way. I'm going to go ahead and say SVG, right? Because that's kind of like what we're allowing someone to decorate with. And now when we go back here, we should be able to pass in class name. And we can give it a position of absolute. And I could say the top will be 2 and the right will be 2. Hopefully this will position it where we want it on the page. Doesn't look like it's getting positioned. Let's double check to make sure this stuff is in fact getting added to the SVG's class. It doesn't look like it, and I think the reason is because we overwrite it down here. Okay, so what we need to do is, in fact, I'm going to wrap this SVG in its own div. And I'm going to move props up to that div. And this will be changed to a div here. So now, there we go. That's one way you can do it. There's various ways you could have done that. So now we have the ability to basically have a heart icon, and when you click it, you want to add that image to have like a tag of favorite or something. So how would we do that? Well, on the heart itself, let's just go ahead and add an on click like this. So what we're going to do is when someone clicks on this heart, we're going to go ahead and try to add a tag to the existing image, so that we can like mark it as favorited. So instead of props any, it might be useful to also bring in, I think it was called like a public ID. I think it was a public ID. I forget, where do we use that? Yeah, I might pass in a public ID here just so that we have access to it in a more easier way. And inside of the component, we're going to change this to public ID. And then I think what we could do is when someone clicks on the heart, we're going to say Cloudinary v2 uploader add tag, and the first argument is the tag that we want to add. I'll just go ahead and say heart or favorite, and then we're going to go ahead and just pass an array of the ID like this. Make sure you do props public ID. So I don't know if this will truly work because I do believe this has to run on Node. So if we go back to our app, you'll see that it cannot resolve FS. So here is where we have some issues, right? We can either bring in and create a public API so that this thing can invoke a public API to do this logic, or we could try to bring in like a server action and pass that down into here so that the server action can do this logic without us having to create an API endpoint and do all this other stuff. So I may bring in the experimental here, the experimental, and I'll say server actions is true. Okay. And what this allows us to do is we can actually call a server action from our front end here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new file called actions. And we're going to say use server. And we're going to say export function mark as favorite action. I'll say set as favorite, okay? And we're going to move some of this logic out of the Cloudinary image. I'm going to move this whole line out. I'm going to put it here. It means we need to pull this out, put it up here. And we're going to take in a public ID, which is a string. We'll do that. And add tag does return a promise, so we should probably wait on this, and we'll say async function like that. Now what this allows us to do, again, server actions are experimental, but you'll see how much easier it allows you to kind of like write code instead of having to build a whole freaking API to do this. You can actually just call the action directly in your client component, right? And I'm going to go ahead and pass props public ID here. Like that. And technically, we should be using a start transition. So if I go over here, I'm going to say const transition and start transition is equal to use transition, like so. And we're going to wrap this thing in a transition. Now, the reason we do this is because you can have blocking logic, and Next recommends that you always wrap this stuff in a transaction or in a transition. Okay. And if you wanted to show like a spinner or loader while this thing is doing its work, you would probably do that. Okay, so we're going to call set as favorite action, but we're also going to call revalidate path. And what path are we on? We are on the gallery. So let's just go ahead and say gallery like that. And that should hopefully invoke Next and tell it to like refetch the images, and we can use that to toggle on or off the hearts. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm not entirely convinced I have this coded up properly. But what I'm also going to do is print out what results is here. Console.log results. I think it's complaining about server actions. I'm going to go ahead and restart my dev server. I think when you change certain things in the Next config, you have to restart your server. So let's try this out. I'm going to refresh the page. Hopefully it's good now. And this should probably be a button. So if we were to hover over this, this should probably hover like a button. Okay, to make this easier for us, I'm going to go ahead and just limit this to 1 because like we have so many console logs now. that it's very hard to tell what data is coming back. So let's just limit it to 1. So the idea is the heart button, which I believe we put into Cloudinary image, which was here. This should kind of have like a hover state. So I'm going to say hover, and I'll say color red. Actually, I think I say text red. Have like a heart color, right? Let's see if that works. Okay, there we go. And then I'm also going to say cursor pointer. Okay. So now the idea, hopefully this works, is when I click this, that should invoke a server action, which should run that Cloudinary code to add a tag to this one image. So I'm going to click it, and let's see what happens on the backend. I'm not even sure if that worked. Let's go to the network tab over here. I'm going to expand this a little bit, and let's click it again and see what happens. Okay, so it is invoking the server action. That's good. And it should be refreshing the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our admin API over here. We're going to go to the console, and we're going to try to find that image. Let me just delete that one. No offense to that woman. So the thing we're trying to tag and mark as a favorite is this over here. And right now it doesn't have any tags on it. Let us go ahead and try it one more time, because I think I have 2 of them. That's confusing. Okay, so one of them actually has a tag of favorite, right? The other one, the duplicate, let's just delete it so we're not confused. In fact, I'm going to delete any duplicates right now. We did the server action. It adds a favorite tag to this image, but the UI isn't really showing any type of difference when it gets hardened, right? So what we need to probably do is, first of all, I don't think we have access to the tags that come back. I'm looking through this data that gets printed out, and I do not see tags. So how do we change the code a little bit to allow us to get tags back? I do believe there is a thing you can pass here to get tags. So let's go back to the search API and let's see if there's a way to get the tags. Okay, down here it says with field, and you can actually specify, I believe, tags. Okay, so with field tags, that's what we want, so that we can actually toggle that image on or off based on if that tag is set. So let's try it again. This should have already fetched the tags. Let's go here. We have a tags array. Okay, so we're making some progress. This thing is an array of search results. This has a tags, which is a string array. So let's just go ahead and update that type so that we can easily use it. And we're going to go ahead and pass in, I'm going to pass in the entire thing. I'm going to go ahead and pass in like the image data. We'll pass in result so that we don't have to keep on passing all this other stuff in, like source, public ID. I'm going to delete that, and we're going to go and export the search result here so that we can use it down in Cloudinary image. Okay, so now instead of this, I'm going to say it's an any and a search result. Import that in so that it's a lot easier for us to basically just do props dot public ID. And then we also have the tags, right? So we can put a computed here and says is favorited equals props dot tags includes favorite. So if that tags array includes favorite, we know we're favorited. And what we could potentially do, I'm getting a bunch of warnings because I think I deleted source here. So I'm going to go ahead and just put source, and this will be props.public ID, just to fix that issue. It was doing like an infinite loop, so I had to kill my server real quick. Okay, but anyway, we're trying to see if the thing was favorited or not, and based on if it was favorited, we're going to go ahead and change what heart is being displayed. So I'm going to go ahead and say if we are favorited, we are going to display probably a full heart. Otherwise, we will display the other heart. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just put another heart here for now, and we're going to actually change this to full heart. Okay, and when you click it, we'll have to do some logic in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and go to this heart component, or this heart icon. I'm going to clone it. I'm going to say full heart. And we're going to change this to full heart. And now let's find with the hero icons. So hero icons, let's find if there is a full heart. So, oh, there is a solid one. Let's copy that JSX and we're going to paste that in here. All right. And maybe I'll rename this a solid heart. You know, it doesn't matter. Okay. All right, so that's good. Let's go back to here and I'm going to import full heart. And technically, we could probably just like modify our action a little bit to instead pass in like a false and a true. So we can kind of reuse the same action. And we're going to say mark as favorite Boolean. And if this thing is, actually I'm going to change this to is favorite. And then say if is favorite, then we're going to do some logic. Otherwise, we'll do some other logic. Okay. And I'm guessing there's a remove tag. Yeah, there's a remove tag right there. Okay. So there you have it. So now we have an action that can be used for doing two different things. You just toggle it on or off. And potentially we could, you know, make this a ternary, clean it up if that's your type of thing. I think it's fine. We're going to go ahead and save this. And we're going to verify that when something has the favorite tag, it actually displays the full heart. All right, it's saying props.tags is not defined. I think what's happening is I'm passing an image data actually, and I typed this completely wrong. So this needs to be image data of search result, which means that this needs to be I'm just going to go ahead and destructure this from props. So we can just like do this image data public ID. Yeah, hopefully that's good. And that one needs to be image data.tags. All right, so now it's favorited. And I might make it actually red. It's favorited. So let's go to full heart here. Might actually do this text white. I'll say text red of 500. All right, so as you hover over it, it'll like turn off. All right, let's test this out. So I'm gonna click on this thing and it did a request. It sent over false. So that should have turned it off. It should have called remove tag on the public ID here. And then it should have revalidated the path. So let's go over here and make sure, like, is that getting removed? It doesn't look like it's getting removed. So just to check this out, I'm gonna go ahead and say like removing favorite from, and we're gonna print out public ID here. So now when we click it, it should be removing that. You know what? I'm dumb. I have this backwards. If this is true, we need to add it. I have these backwards. I'm so sorry. Let's do that. I think that'll fix the issue. Let's click this. And let's refresh the page. All right, there we go. Click it. And then you have to manually refresh the page. Again, I think there is a little bit of delay. I think we might just have to wait for a second. Like maybe this isn't the best approach, but I'm going to say await new promise, resolve, set timeout, resolve 1 second. I'm not happy with that approach, but let's see if this actually fixes it. So I think what's happening is that sometimes when you're dealing with third-party APIs, their data is eventually consistent. So although you did tell it to add a tag, behind the scenes, it may take up to a second or less to like really propagate through their systems. So I think that's like kind of what we're seeing. I think the best approach to handling this is you want to do some type of optimistic updates so that the moment you click this, we'd have to kind of go through state and manually change this to become like toggled. Okay, but I'm going to put that on a to-do list because I just want to get like the main functionality kind of implemented. And at this point, what we want to do is, can we show all favorited images inside a favorites gallery? Okay. So what I'm going to do is at this point, we have a decent amount of functionality created for this gallery. And we're going to do the exact same thing minus a couple of changes on the favorites page. So let's just go ahead and make a new folder here called favorites. Okay, and then I'll make a page.tsx, and we're going to go ahead and paste this in. Okay, we don't need search results. We're going to say favorites page. We probably still need the Cloudinary image. Now at this point we have like a shared component between two different pages. I think it's okay just to keep it here. Some people would probably pull it out and put it into components. Until I know for certain that these aren't going to change because they're on two completely different pages, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm going to try to reuse it from the gallery for right now. And the upload button, we don't need to worry about because we're not going to be able to upload anything from this page. So let's just go ahead and import the search result type. We don't need an upload button, but we do need a favorite images. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to do another search, but we want to get back all of the images that have a tag of favorite. So let's go back to their API because I don't remember how to do this. I believe you can search via tag somewhere. Right here, you can say in tags of kitten. So let's go back and I'm going to say find me all images that have a tag of favorite. And I'm going to go ahead and limit this to 30. And we'll get back the tags as well. This should be okay. So I think what should happen here is, in fact, I'm going to go to the gallery too, and I'm going to change this to 30. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of these to our favorites. I'll add the scuba guy. I'll add this one. Okay, those are added in. Again, it's a little bit delayed, but it is what it is. Let's go ahead and add this shoe. Looks pretty cool. Hopefully they got added. So let's go to the favorites. Now, unfortunately, you can't even click on the side nav here, so we could probably fix that real quick. Let's go to the layout, and let's go to the side nav. I guess I called it side menu. And we're going to make these as links. So let's do a link in here. So this will be a next link, and we're going to give it an href of gallery. Okay, and we're going to wrap all this in a link. And for the button, I'm going to say as child. Okay, and that should hopefully allow us to navigate to this. And then over here, we have albums. We're not going to worry about albums yet. In fact, I'm going to comment this out so we don't have distractions. I'm going to put a link here, and that's going to be called favorites. That, and again, as child. Okay. Now, I don't like how this is a secondary variant. I'm going to make it a ghost for right now, because it's going to require a little bit more engineering to figure out if this is the current page that we're on. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this. So now we have the favorites here, and we have the gallery, right? So I should be able to click on one of these to remove it from favorites. And unfortunately, this is where you run into an issue, because there's hard-coded logic in the server action to refresh a particular page. So if you look at the actions, this is hard-coded to refresh gallery. We could potentially have this be passed in. Since a lot of this functionality is kind of consistent, I'm going to go ahead and say path is a string, and we're going to pass that in. Okay, so wherever we call this, which is over here, we're going to say this is going to be a particular path passed in. Okay, and again, this path would probably need to be passed in right here. This is honestly why I don't like sharing components, is because you get these weird situations where you start adding in code to get it to work. But really, these are two separate like paths, use cases, I guess I could say. All right, I think that's good. We're going to find out where we're calling Cloudinary image. One of these is on the gallery page, which is not this one. I'll say favorites. The other one is on the gallery. And just for now, I'm going to bump this up a little bit because I do believe 1 second wasn't enough in some instances. So let's try this again. We're on the favorites. If I click on this shoe and wait a little bit, it should disappear. Go to gallery. I'm going to click on some of these things. All right, so here is another issue with Next.js's app router. Next.js does a bunch of client-side caching. They do that for reasons that are probably good in terms of performance, but if you aren't careful, you're going to have a lot of issues when it comes to user experience. Notice how I just favorited a bunch of stuff, and I went to the favorites page, and they're not here. By default, you have to wait 30 seconds because the next router is going to cache all of the things you did if you already visited that page, right? So if I do a hard refresh, these things will show up. But if I were to go in here and like add this one as a favorite and then go to my favorites page, you'll notice that it does not load up. So the only solution I have found, and this is a Next.js problem, I have been vocal about this. The only solution I have found to like work around this is you have to go to the page that you know has dynamic data, and you have to basically inject a client component into it and tell this React Server component to refresh the moment the page loads. So I'm going to add this little hack in here. You guys can cringe in the comments, but I'm going to go ahead and say force refresh TSX. This is going to export a function called force refresh, and it's going to have a use effect that on mount is going to call router.refresh. We don't have router, so let's just say const router is equal to use router. And we will say router.refresh here. All right. And make sure we say use client at the top here. Okay, so again, hopefully you understand that caching issue. I'm going to basically just add this anywhere in my component so that when this gets loaded on the front end, let's see, I actually need to return a fragment here. So now you'll see the page will load, but there'll be a slight delay and then I'll refresh and get all the data, right? So if I do the heart image here of the cat and then I go over to favorites, you'll see the cat finally pop up. That's the only fix I know of to get this working. Although at this point, I'm not too happy with like some of the set timeouts I have in this app. I think we're making a little bit of good functionality. I'm going to commit what I have and just go ahead and just say adding in the favorites page and go ahead and commit that. So at this point, I think I want to actually do some work to make this more responsive and like not have to wait a whole second for stuff to refresh. So I'm going to bring in optimistic updating, which isn't going to be too hard to do. So to fix this, the first thing we're going to do is in the action itself, when we click on a heart, we want this to just be like instantaneous and not try to revalidate the path. So let's go to the actions. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the revalidate path, and I'm also going to get rid of the set timeout here. So we're going to kind of backtrack on all this path stuff that we did. Okay. Go ahead and find where we're passing in the path. I don't think we even need that anymore. And then also where we're calling this, let's go ahead and get rid of that path that we passed in. All right, so the next step is the state of when we show the full heart or the empty heart. What we could do is we could put this in state instead of it being a derived so that we can modify it later on. So I'm going to say const is favorited and set is favorited here. I'll say use state. And for the initial state, we're going to go ahead and pass in this Boolean, right? And auto import that. And the main difference that we're going to do is when we click on the full heart, we're going to go ahead and say set favorited to false. Then when we click on the empty heart, we will set it to true. Okay, so behind the scenes, we're going to kick off an action that's going to update the database behind the scenes, but we're going to optimistically just set it to true or false or vice versa when users click on the icons. So let's just go ahead and try that out. If I click on this, notice that it instantly becomes a heart. Over here, instantly becomes a heart. You can also unheart all these things. Now, as I go to my favorites gallery, you'll see that those kind of pop up. Now, there's also an issue with the favorites gallery. As I unheart things, you kind of expect these to be removed from the page, right? Like they're no longer hearted. So, and the only way to get these to go away is you have to navigate away and then back, and then they'll finally get off the page. So let's do some more optimistic updates to just remove them when you unheart them. Okay, so let's go to the favorites page. This one might be a little bit more complicated. In order to remove things from an array, we're going to have to pull in another client component, I would think. So let's just go here and call this a favorites list.tsx. And we're going to go ahead and copy this whole page, paste it in, and we're going to just get rid of everything else other than the grid, and we don't need these results anymore. Okay, we're going to actually have the resources passed in. So I'll say resources equals search result, I believe is what we called it. Okay, that could be an array. And now we're going to loop over the property that's passed in like this, and that should work fine. Now the main difference again is like we want to, when someone unhearts an image, we're going to go ahead and just remove it from this resources. So we do need to add this to state. I'm going to say const resources, and I'm going to say set resources equals use state. And we're going to pass in, we're actually rename this to initial resources like this. We'll pass that in. Okay. And the idea is that now we have this ability to modify state. I need to get rid of this async here. So now we can modify state, right? So after something has been unhearted, I'm going to say unheart. We can actually update this array and remove the thing that was unhearted. So this will actually be the unhearted resource. And we're going to say set resources of current resources, return current resources.filter resource, return resource.public ID is not equal to unhearted resource.public ID. Okay, kind of verbose. We can actually clean this up a little bit by removing the returns and then just kind of implicitly returning everything. That makes sense. Now this new method that we added doesn't exist on the Cloudinary image, so we're going to go over here and we're going to add it in. This will be a function that does nothing. Okay, and we will also pass in a unhearted resource is a search result. Okay, and the whole reason we're doing this is so that we can go down here and I can go ahead and bring that in, unhearted resource. We're going to go to the full heart, and when you click it, we want to also call unheart resource, and I will just go ahead and pass in the image data that we have. So basically our child component is invoking a callback so that our parent component knows when to remove it from the page. Let's go back up here. This one, I think I'm missing some typing. Let's see. I might actually get rid of this props any. I do think it's causing some issues with TypeScript. So I'm going to go ahead and put props, and this is going to be this. And I'm going to say key is a string any. Actually, I'm going to define these, and I'm also going to combine this with that other props. I think it's called component props. And which props do we want to do? This will be I might just do this. Let me rename this to unheart. I think I was doing this wrong. So unheart. So we're defining a function that can be passed in as props called onUnheart, and we're going to call it down here when you click on the full heart. So let's see. Now this is kind of an optional thing, so I might actually make this optional, and we're going to only invoke this when it's defined. Okay, so let's go back up here. I'm going to say unheart. Let's go back to the favorites list, and we have unheart here. That should all work fine. It's saying path is missing. I think we actually removed path, so let's delete that. There is still a TypeScript error. This is expecting source, so I might say omit, and we'll say source right here. That should hopefully make TypeScript happy because I decided to put the source in the actual component. So I know this is getting kind of confusing, but really we're just trying to, like I said, know when someone clicks the unheart functionality so we can run some custom logic and filter out that array. So now on the actual favorites page, what we want to do is we're going to render out the favorites list, which I don't think I named yet. So let's go over here. I'm going to call this favorites list like this. Go back over here. I'm going to auto import that. I'm going to delete what we have over here. Now this thing takes in, I think, resources. Yeah, initial resources. And we're going to say results.resources. Okay. So hopefully, if we did this correctly, we should be able to oh, I forgot to add use client at the top. Use client. There we go. So now if I go to my favorites and I were to go ahead and click some of these, it should filter them off the page the moment I click them. But there is a bug. Now that when we unfavorite some stuff, the router is still caching everything. So if you go back to gallery, notice how there's 4 here. If I click gallery and then I go back, it shows 7. So there's like some caching issue going on. And the reason this is happening is because the React server component is sending over some new props to this Cloudinary, to this favorites list, but this component doesn't know how to update it. All right, so you do have to add in a use effect like this. And we can just go ahead and say, watch when initial resources changes. Then we're going to go ahead and just reset this with initial resources. And by the way, if you know of a better way to do this, leave a comment. I feel like we shouldn't have to do this just to update props that get changed. But this is the only thing I can think of to like fix that issue. So now if I go ahead and just remove a couple of things, click away, I come back, notice that it does on the first click clear those out. Okay, so now the app is like a lot more responsive. I can click on this, that, this, and that. Go to favorites, it'll be added in. And I'm actually a lot more happy with this. Although the code did become a little bit more complex, I think this is a much better user experience. And we still have the ability to use the server actions to still achieve what we want. We just have to kind of do a little bit more optimistic updates to achieve what we want. So I want to try to clean up the gallery a little bit to make it look a little bit nicer. Right now, you notice that there's like weird space in between the images. And I think if we kind of restructured the page a little bit to actually have 4 columns, instead of using CSS grid or Tailwind grid, we can actually have 4 legit columns that will put the images stacked on top of each other. I think it'll make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm on the gallery right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to write a function that's going to give us the entries that should live in the first column, second column, third column, etc. So I'm going to go ahead up here and I'll say function get columns. And this is going to be a function that takes in a number. So I'll say like call index or something like that. And that could be a number between like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're simply going to take the results here and we're going to map over them. Actually, we're going to filter, and I will say, let's say we get a resource and then also an index, right? And what we're planning to do here is we're going to simply check if the index mod 4 is equal to the column index, then that's when we will return that data. Now, I don't like having a magic number hard-coded here, so I'm going to go ahead and just say const max columns is equal to 4. We're going to replace that. And we can also kind of clean up this code, get rid of the return statements to also clean that up some. All right, so you might ask, okay, what's this used for? Why do we need a get columns method? Well, instead of just looping over all these and mapping over them, instead, we could potentially do something like this. I'm gonna go ahead and make an array inside some curly braces, and I'll say get column of 0, like this, and then we'll just go ahead and do this 4 times. And I'll simplify this in just a second, but basically, if we map over these columns, and we return another div here, like so. We can give this a class name of flex, and then flex call, and then like a gap of 4. And then all these divs are going to have all of these Cloudinary images. So if I go ahead and just put this in here, and I will say column dot map, that should hopefully make that a little bit better. Now, I think this is complaining because we don't have a key on the top level map. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do an index like this. And that looks like it's pretty happy. So let's make sure if we go back to the page and refresh, if I did this correctly, we should see a nicer Masonry Grid, which just makes the app a little bit nicer, right? But now the issue is if I were to go to the favorites page, notice that this is using the same old approach. So now we've kind of reached a point where maybe we could like have a shared component that's used for the gallery and the favorites. And going down here, I'll just go ahead and make another one called like image grid.tsx. Just go ahead and work on this. I'll say export function image grid. And this thing could take in some images. Could be an array of images like that. And let's abstract away all of this. Let's just go ahead and cut that out. I'm going to paste it in here as a return so that we can use the same logic on various different pages. Now also the get column thing, we can also pull that stuff out too. Like that. And then we have to just start auto importing some stuff, make sure we have all of our stuff defined. Let's actually put this function inside of that because I think it needs access to images. I'll do this. Here we go. And I think that should be good. Now let's go back over here. I'm gonna go ahead and just say image grid like this. And make sure we pass in the images. So I'm gonna say images and we'll say result.resources. Cool, so going back to the gallery, let's make sure this didn't break. Still looks good, that's awesome. But also, the benefit of this shared component is we can actually copy this and we can go to the favorites. And I'm gonna go ahead and just look at this code. It looks like the favorites list probably needs to be replaced a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and just put a component here called image grid. And go ahead and auto import that. So unfortunately, this actually has a little bit different use case. Remember, like we have some logic to do some optimistic deleting of the entries when you unheart something. So the code on the favorites page is diverging just enough from the gallery page that our generic component is not good enough. Okay, so we need to figure out a way to either A, just duplicate code and have it in 2 different places, or B, we can try to make a generic component which allows us to basically set on unheart over here. So just for experience, let's try like having image grid, instead of it hard coding what this Cloudinary image is, let's actually have that be a function. I'll say get image. We'll call it get image. All right, so this is going to take in a get image, and then we're going to type that over here. We'll say get image is going to be a function that returns a React node, I believe, hopefully. And we're going to pull this out. Okay, so instead of like mapping it here, we're going to go ahead and pull that out to the gallery first of all. And we're going to try to pass it in as a dynamic constructor of the component. Okay, so this will be a function that needs to return the Cloudinary image. And we're going to get back a image here, which we're going to call search result. I'm not a fan of calling it search result at this point, but that's what we're using. And let's go back to the image definition here. This is going to take an image data, I guess we could say. Go back over here. We'll call this image data, and we're going to go ahead and use that image data, and we'll pass that in there. Does that make sense? So like we wanted to allow this image grid to be used on various different pages, but different pages have different functionality when you click the heart or when you do different things. Okay, so let us try to do the same logic on the favorites page. So we have the image grid here. I'm going to go ahead and try to return this instead. This, go ahead and paste that in. Make sure that we have image data here and pass in image data. And then I'm going to delete some of this stuff. And it looks like this just takes resources. All right, so I don't know. We'll check this out. If we did this correctly, what we should see is both should be showing the Masonry Grid. They should both all work as they did before. Unfortunately, this is not updating when you click on stuff. Okay, it used to delete it from the array, but now it's not working. So we got to kind of figure that out. I think what's happening here is I should probably say use client. I don't know if that'll make a difference. Oh, secondly, I know what's going on. We set it up to take in a get image, but we have it hard coded here still. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to actually pass a map to get image like this. And I think that should take care of it. There we go. Okay, this one's having some issues. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. The image is a function. Functions cannot be passed directly to client components unless you explicitly expose it by marking it with use server. So I think, let's go to the gallery. All right, so this is kind of painful. Like, we can't pass a function here because we're in a server component. So we actually need to like figure out a way to go over here. And we need to make a, I'll call it a gallery grid.tsx. And we basically want to take this code. Okay, we're going to delete a lot of this. We're going to get rid of the async stuff. So it's a server component. We're going to delete all of this. And the whole reason we're doing this, again, is because like you can't do certain things on the React server components. So we're going to go ahead and have this thing be passed in images. Like that. We'll just go ahead and say this is images. And hopefully this will work better. So now instead of saying image grid, because we have to like dynamically pass it a function, I'm going to say gallery grid. And we're going to say auto import that. Images will be results.resources like that. And go ahead and delete all that. So let's see if this works. I'm going to click gallery, hit refresh, see what happens. There we go. Favorites, does it work? Click off. Go back to gallery, kind of heart some things. Okay. So if you were to ask me like, what is the main thing I hate about the app router? It's probably what we just did. The fact that I had to like take some code, literally put it in a separate file so that I can just put use client at the top. It's just a pain. I'm trying to accept it, but overall, I just don't like how we have to do this with our components. It's just not fun, unless there's a way to kind of work around that, which I don't think there is. Okay, so I think the code is a little bit cleaner. We have like this nice grid that we can actually use on various pages. I don't think it's very responsive. At some point, like when the page gets too small, you know, we're going to have to probably reduce the grids, but we're not going to focus on the responsiveness of the app just yet. I think let's just focus on getting some good functionality going. So I think at this point, what I want to try to work on is the ability to add images to albums, okay? So like if you're on a gallery or you're on your favorites page, having a button that you can click that'll make a drop-down pop up where you can add it to a new album. So let's try to see if we can at least get a drop-down showing up. So let's go to the Shadcn UI and let's try to find if there's like a menu, like a drop-down menu. Okay, we have drop-down menu here. This looks pretty good. So let us go ahead and install this. Okay. If you look at the code for how this is done, this is how it's done. Drop-down menu, we got a drop-down menu trigger as child, you make a button. So let's try to grab, we obviously don't need all of this drop-down menu logic, we just need like some of it. So I guess we'll start with all of it for right now. Yeah, let's just start with all of it and I'll delete the stuff. Sometimes it's easier to do things like that. So inside of the image grid, that is creating a Cloudinary image, which technically this is used in multiple places. So I would kind of think that we could actually pull that out to a shared component as well. Let's try doing that and hopefully it doesn't break everything. But inside this components directory, I'm also going to make a image menu. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and paste in all that code that we just copied. And the idea is we're going to try to get this menu to show up next to the heart on those images. Okay. Now I did change the location of this a little bit, so I think we're going to have to like refactor where some of the stuff is. I'm actually just going to delete stuff and like we can just auto import it in a bit. Okay. Go over here, let's delete that. Go ahead and auto import that again. And we probably broke it in various places, so let's do this. Cool. Now, let's focus. So on the Cloudinary image, remember that's like the main image component. What we want to do here is we have hearts, but I also want to try to add in a menu. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just put a image menu like this. And let's see what happens when you do that. Go back to our app here. All right, so now you click this button, we get a profile button. Now, I want to try to change this to be a hamburger menu, and I'm going to put it in the top right, and I'm actually going to move the heart over to the left. So if we go to hero icons and say like menu, this one looks like it'd be pretty good. Let's just copy the JSX here, and inside of icons, I'm going to go ahead and just put one called menu, JSX, export function menu, and just return that JSX there, okay? And we're going to go ahead and put menu inside the button. Okay, there we got a little menu there. And we have to do some more stuff to kind of position that. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Okay, now as far as the menu, we want to add a class here. I'll say class name, and we're going to give it an absolute position. And I'm going to say top of 2, right of 2. And that should kind of place it over the heart. In fact, this doesn't seem to work, so I might actually have to like make a div here like this, give this a class name, and wrap this whole menu. It's a little big. I don't like how big that is. So let's see if we can find a way to like maybe not make it a variant. Let's try ghost and see what happens. Okay, looks a little bit better. Now, can we change the width and the height of this thing? I'll say width of like 12, height of 12, and see what happens. Okay, maybe I'll keep it a secondary. Is there a way that we can like make this a little bit smaller? I don't know what's causing it to be so large. Is it the button class? Like if I just get rid of the menu, the button, will that work? Okay, let's just make it smaller, width and height of 8, and see what happens. Okay, that looks pretty good, but unfortunately, the actual menu icon disappears. So I think this thing might have some padding built into it. Let's just give it a padding of 0 and see if that helps. There we go. I think this looks okay. Not the best, but I'm not a designer. So what we're also going to do is find the heart. And we want to change this to be, instead of top 2, we're going to say left. Actually, instead of right 2, we're going to say left 2. Cool. So now we actually have like this drop-down menu that exists on every image. And we also have the ability to, again, favorite it and remove from being favorites. So what do we want to add to the menu? Okay, the menu right now, I think instead of saying profile, we should probably make this thing be a add to album button. I'm going to get rid of the shortcut. I don't think we really need a shortcut for that. And I don't like how this is hard-coded to 56. Like, I'd rather this be something smaller. Maybe 24 be a better thing to use. Go ahead and fix that spelling there. Okay, so 24 is a little bit small. Let's do 32. And then what we can probably also do is find a folder. Like here, this looks good. Folder plus. I'll say folder plus TSX. export function folder plus, and then return that. Looks pretty good. You could also use Lucid React, which I do believe is like an icon library. So like I think they probably have like a folder plus in here. So maybe that's easier than using hero icons. I apologize for like using hero icons when I have this other library that has fonts in it, or that has icons. So let's try that instead and see what happens. All right, so we made a lot of changes. I'm gonna go ahead and commit this real quick, and then we will continue on adding more features. I'll go ahead and add all these, and I'll say grid, component, and menu, image menu. Go ahead and add those and sync those up. All right, so now let's try to think through like, what does it mean to add to an album? So when I click add to album, we're gonna have to, first of all, list all the albums that we have. Maybe we can like load up a modal or something, and like you can select which album you want to add it to. So yeah, let's just try to go down that path. Let's see if there is a modal component here. They do have a dialogue. Maybe that's what we want. Yeah, so like we could actually have like a add to album here. Maybe we could have the ability to like create a new one if it doesn't exist, or have some drop downs or something. But yeah, this one should be good. Let's just give this a shot, this dialogue component. Let's just copy it, and let's go ahead and install it like so. All right. And then if you look at the code for this one, we can probably just copy all this code and let us go to over here. We're gonna make a new component called the add to album dialog and just paste all that in, okay? Now let's make sure that this thing will work. It looks like we need a label and an input for this example to work. So let's just go ahead and add a label. We're also going to add an input. I'm going to rename this to add to album dialog. And it looks like this thing actually has like a trigger. So like technically this whole thing could take the place of this. Not too sure about to figure that out. Do that. Let's try to put the add to album inside that image menu here. Let's just test this out. I don't think I've tried this before, so we'll see if this works. All right, so going back to our code, if I were to click on this and click add to album, do we get anything to pop up? Thing, React children only expected to receive a single React element child. So I guess this thing, oh, this thing has too many children, all right? So we'll have to like, maybe what we need to do is, let's add the button back, and we're gonna try to just do this instead. Instead of outline, we'll say secondary. We got a little weird bug here. When you click add to album, it loads up the thing, but then it closes it. I wonder if this is some type of condition where like having a nested clickable thing inside this drop-down menu item is closing too much. All right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add as child here. And over here, I'm actually gonna get rid of the button for right now. I'm just gonna make this like a div. That, and let's see how this looks. I'm gonna make sure this, and I'm gonna make this a variant ghost. All right, so let's try this out. So the as child is the thing that kind of fixed it. I do think there's a weird bug underneath where like the original menu is not closing after you've clicked it. So we'll have to look into that later. But now we got a cool way to actually have a dialog show up that allows us to either select an album, like using like a select dropdown, or we could just like type in a name of a new one or something. Right now, we're going to keep it simple. I always try to take the simplest steps forward before I do more difficult things. So let's just go ahead and change some of the stuff. So instead of edit profile, we'll say add to album. and I'll say type an album you want to add this image into. And I'm going to say move this image into. And then down here, we'll say album, and then we are actually just going to stick with one thing for right now. Like that. So instead of defaulting this to Pedro, we're going to actually put family album or something. But we probably want to have this be hooked into state so that when they click add to album, we can actually get some type of like server action firing. All right, so there are a couple things we need to do is, first of all, the input. We're going to have to listen to some state. I'll just go ahead and say like album name and set album name equals use state. We'll default that to an empty string. And then down here for the input on change, we will just go ahead and do this. Okay. And then finally down here, when you click on the button, on click, we're going to go ahead and just call a function that's going to probably invoke a server action to add this image to an album name. Now, the second thing is we don't know what image they're trying to select, right? So we should probably have the image be passed in. And this one could be a search result. Okay, and now for the album name over here, I think we should probably put value is equal to that album name. And yeah, let's just make sure this works. So if I were to click add to album, we see this modal. You can type in, you can click add, but it's not closing anything yet. Let's go back to the image menu. This thing actually is supposed to take in a, what do we call it? An image, right? Which should actually be a destructured prop here, like this. So now we're going to have to basically pass that in. Whatever image that the user is kind of using the dropdown for, we're going to pass that in. And let's just keep going up. This thing, image menu, needs to be passed in an image. So here we'll say image is equal to image data. Okay. I'm guessing there's somewhere else that we need to update this. Maybe not. Let's make sure this works. So when you click on this, I'm going to go ahead and just console log the image here. I want to make sure that we did get this all the way passed down. So I'm going to go ahead and click add to album, click this button, and notice that we do have the full asset showing up, which is good. We have access to the public ID, which is probably what we're going to need to move this from the root folder into an album folder. All right, so one thing I'm not sure about is after you actually click add to album, how do you close this modal? I'm not really sure how to do that. All right, if you click API reference, I do believe this is using Radix UI under the hood, and so you can kind of go over here, and there may be a way to dynamically close it. Interaction with outside the element will be disabled and only change the default rendered element. So down here, it looks like the root dialog. You can actually pass it in open state. I wonder if that's what we need to do. Looks like you can. So I'm gonna go ahead and say open, and on open change, set open state. I'm gonna go ahead and just put another state variable here, like that. And by default, I'm gonna set it to false. And what we could potentially do is down here, after you click it, I'll add this back in, and I'm gonna go ahead and say set it to false. So I just wanna verify, like, can I close the modal after I click save? There we go. Awesome. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to be able to type in a name of a folder and kind of move that to a different folder. So let's go and look at the API reference here. If you go to the admin API, it looks like in Cloudinary you can actually create folders. This is how you can create a new folder. Going down here, it says Cloudinary V2 API create folder, and you pass the folder name and then the callback, will tell you when it's done being created. But I think what we want to do is when someone actually clicks add to album, we want to invoke a server action. Okay, now the server action, we could potentially define like here in this components directory. We'll do that for now. I don't know if this is the best place to put it. I'm going to go ahead and say actions TS for right now. And I'm going to put a use server at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and just say export async function create folder. And that is going to run this Cloudinary code. So let's just go ahead and import some of the stuff. So import Cloudinary from Cloudinary. And this will be a folder as a string as an argument. And then when it's done, and I think we can just do a wait here. We don't need to do a .then callback. So we can create the folder. And then we also want to add the image to the folder probably. So we'll create the folder and then we'll say like const folder is equal to this. And then we also want to take in like an image. So I'm going to say search result. I'll say existing folder here. And what we're going to do is hopefully there's a way to add an image to a folder. I have to go look at their docs. Let's see if we can just find something by using TypeScript. Is there like an add image? No. There's a create folder, delete folder, search folders, resources by asset folders. Is there a image, a resource? So it looks like there's a upload or rename function. We could try doing that. Let's do v2 uploader rename. And this takes a public ID. So luckily we have the image public ID. And then we can rename it to a folder. So I think we can just basically say folder slash image that public ID. Go ahead and await on this too. I wonder what existing folder has. Okay, so let's try this out. I don't know, I haven't really tried this. We'll see if this works. We're going to pass in the image, and then we're going to pass in the new folder that the person typed, which is going to be the album name. And then after that, let's go ahead and import that and save this. Put async here to make sure this works. Oh, I think I have them backwards, so I actually need to swap those. I need to create a folder. Image goes first, and then the folder name. And in fact, I think it'd make more sense to call this like add image to album. And I'll kind of rename this to album. So like we're abstracting away the underlying folder stuff that's kind of baked into Cloudinary. And we're just going to call these albums. And we're going to go back to our code and just kind of rename that input a little bit. All right, so here is the moment of truth. If we were to try doing this, I'm going to click on this desert scene, add to album, and I'll type outdoors and click add to album. Let's see what happens. So if we go to Cloudinary, go to my media library and click on this. Is this thing added to any type of folder? In a location of outdoors. So we did add it to the folder. That's pretty cool. So obviously this isn't the best dialogue. Like it'd be better if there was like a drop down with selects, but at some point there's just too much functionality you can add into an app. And I won't be like, working on this for 20 hours to make a video, but I think that's good enough right now. Just be able to type in the name of the album and it'll just add it to it. But maybe having a type ahead, which I do believe Cloudinary supports a way to list all of the root level folders that you have. So when you create the dialog, you could just fetch from Cloudinary all the folders, show that in a type ahead, or create the folder or the album if it doesn't exist, which we might actually do right now. So I'm going to go over here on the left. We want to actually have a way to view all the albums. So let's go to the side navigation, which I think is in layout. We're going to add back this albums thing that we had before. And we're going to go ahead and just put this all in a link here. So I'll just go ahead and say link href is albums, like this. I'll say as child. There we go. And the idea is when you click this, it should take you to a view that shows all of your albums. And then you can kind of click in further into those albums. So let's see if we were to click albums, what does it take us to? It takes us to a non-existing page. So let's move on to trying to build out the albums view. If we go to here in app, I'll type albums. And we're going to have to create a page which is going to display all the albums. So I'm going to copy an existing page real quick, and right now, just comment some stuff out. I'll say albums page. We don't need state. Technically, we don't need a client yet. You know, all this we can just delete. So I probably should have just created a new one. Let's make sure this shows up. If I were to type in like albums, does this show up on this page now? It does. And I think maybe we should have copied gallery. I think galleries would have been a better approach going forward. Yeah, let's just copy this instead. All right, so we got the albums. So what we want to do is we want to display cards for all the different albums that we have in the system. And when you dive into an album, it'll show you all the images that are in that album. So the first thing is, how do we get the albums that exist in our system? Well, we're going to have to go and look that up, right? So let's go over here. I do believe there's a way using the admin API to do that. And you know, in fact, I probably don't even need to like look anything up. I'm just going to go ahead and just play with TypeScript. Typically, TypeScript will help you out. I'll do API. I will say list. No, there are folders, root folders. Here we go. I think if you just call root folders, that'll actually return you a list of all folders. So I'm going to list out those folders real quick and make sure this actually works. So let's go to our app. I'm going to go ahead and just refresh this page, and we should see in our terminal some type of list of folders. Okay, this is what the data structure looks like. It's pagination, so like we could just destruct folders. That's going to be an array of these, which has a name and a path. Okay, so technically I could type this as an object that has folders, which is going to be an array of name string, path string, like this, just so we get a little bit of type sense and IntelliSense. And now what we could do is we can actually render those things out in a grid or a list. Okay, so again, Shadcn, let's see if there is a card. We got a card component down here. Looks pretty good. Let's just go ahead and see, like, do we need to install something? Yeah, we got to install a card here, so I'll go ahead and grab that. I will go here, add the card. Right, that's done installing. And then if we look at the code, we don't have to look at the code. Let's just copy it. We're going to go ahead and just make a new thing called a album card tsx, paste that in. And let's see what we could potentially delete from this to get this kind of working. It looks like there's a select here. We don't care about a select, so I'm actually going to delete that whole select area. There we go. And I just want to see this show up on the page if I were to kind of like map over those folders. So I'm going to say folders.map. For every folder that we have in our system, let us create a card like this. Actually, not a card. We're going to do an album card. So let's go over here and change this to album card. And we need to pass in the folder here so we have access to it. And at this point, we should probably say export type folder is equal to this. Okay, and then I'll just type this as an array of folders. Album card could take in a folder, which is going to be like this. There. And the idea is that we want to render that out somewhere. In the title, probably. So we can say the name. And say all of your folder.name images. What that? All right, going to our app. Refresh the page and see what happens. There we go. We got some albums showing up. Now we don't need this name input, so obviously we can just like delete it. The whole form can go away. And then instead of having like cancel and deploy, we really just need one button or a link. I'll say as child and I'll say link. And I will say view album. And then this thing, technically it needs to point to albums and then probably the folder name, like that. Go ahead and import that. I think it needs to come from navigation. And what is this complaining about? The link does not have a constructor or call signatures. Oh, I'm importing the wrong thing. Let's import them from next link. Okay. I don't like how this has a hard-coded width. Let's try getting rid of that and see what happens. And then we're going to go ahead and inside of here, we're going to do a div that has a grid calls 3. And this could have a key of folder.path maybe. And then probably some gap. I'll say gap of 4. Now it would be cool to have like the actual like one random image or just an image from that album. But the idea is when you click view album, it should take us to the outdoors album. So let's try to add that in so we can show all the images. So I'm going to make another folder here called album name, like this. And then I'm going to make a page tsx. Now this is going to be very similar to gallery. So this page will probably be really similar to gallery. I'm going to go ahead and just like copy all of gallery and just paste it in here. And we probably need to have some type of grid potentially. So I'll just go ahead and add that in here. We'll just kind of like change stuff around. I'll say album grid. All right, go ahead and import that one. Need to go ahead and use the album grid down here. We don't need an upload button right now. We probably want the actual album name, so I'll have to figure out how to get that. I do believe your props will be passed in, so like this will be album name, like this. I do believe. So like I think technically I could just do that. Now it's not happy with the TypeScript, so I'm going to say params is an object with album name string. Let's see, does that show, if I refresh this page, will it show outdoor? And it does. Awesome. So now it's just a matter of doing search, but getting all of the images that are like in this album or this folder. I don't know how to do that, so let's go to admin API. Let's go to the search API. Let's see if we can find a folder. Folder equals, yeah, so we could just do and folder equals album name. Hopefully this is how you do it. Nice. That's working. There's like a giant error over here or warning. Function component cannot be given refs. Attempts to access this ref will fail. Did you mean to use React forward ref? I don't add to album dialog. Add to album dialog. Is there a ref somewhere? Yeah, I don't know if I want to go through like debugging that, but now we actually have the ability to add various things to this album now. So like I can click here, I can say outdoors, I can click add to album, and I wish I could automatically close that, but let's go to albums and go to outdoors. Let's see if we can add something else to the album. So I'm gonna say add to album, and then I'm gonna go ahead and say outdoors, click add to album, and let's see, did this actually work? Do I get any errors down here? Yeah, it didn't crash. There it is. Now I do think that this albums page will suffer from the same issue where I need to do like a force refresh, or else it's just gonna load bad data or stale data. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in. But I do want to see what happens if I were to like add this to a different album like Scuba and click add. You would hope that this thing would get removed from this album and move to a different album, which it is added to Scuba, I believe. Let me do a hard refresh here. I guess it didn't add it to Scuba. Let's go to our media folders over here. We have a Scuba folder, and that has an outdoors folder. Okay, I think the issue is that our action that's like moving things around, it's just appending a prefix, right? So really what we want to do is like replace the entire album from the public ID. So like we're going to have to rename, like, we'll have to do this, replace. We might actually have to split on the album first. So like I'll do parts is equal to image.public id.split on slashes. Yeah, so it's almost like if parts.length is greater than 1, then we know that it's already part of an album. So what we're actually going to do is I'm going to say parts is equal to parts.sub, not substring, I'll say slice of 1. So that'll just get rid of the first root album. And then I can say const public ID is equal to parts.join with slashes. And we are going to go ahead and put that here instead. There's probably a much better way to do that. But let's see if that actually works. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to that Scuba outdoors image, because I think I just kind of messed this one up, and say move to folder. I'm going to go ahead and go to the home folder and move it there. All right, let's try this. I'm going to find that Scuba image. I'm going to say add to album. I'll say Scuba. Click add. And now it should have been added to Scuba. Here it is. Now if I were to add it to outdoors, that should add it to the outdoor album. There it is. And it should be gone from Scuba now. Cool. So this thing staying open is really bothering me. So I'm actually going to go and try to see if I can fix that real quick. I'm guessing Shadcn is using, for the dialogues, they're probably using Radix. Radix, yeah. And let's go to the API here. I'm guessing it's very similar where you can pass like an open. Yeah, it's very similar. So let's just fix that real quick because it's just bothering me. Image menu. We're going to say const open set open equals useState of false. And then we're going to go ahead and when you click on this thing, add to album dialog, we want to close this menu. I think we could potentially just do this. On click, set open false. Let's try that out first and see if that works. I'll click here. Okay. Of course that's not going to work because I need to actually say open is equal to open. And then also And then over here, I need to say set open for on open change. I think that should fix it. Okay, that's not working. Let me try adding it to this. Is that even clickable? Okay, I actually might add it, so I'll say on open. We're gonna go here and we're gonna pass in on open. And we'll say on open is a function that calls something. And we want to go ahead and yeah, I'm going to bind into this. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a function here. And then I'll say like new open state. And then I'll say set open is called. And then this will be new open state. Does that make sense? So basically I'm just like decorating the function so that it'll invoke the menu so that I know that, hey, like this dialog has been opened. And then it should close the menu. Keep our fingers crossed. Let's see if this works. Click it. I think the issue is that because this thing is nested inside of this component, it's getting deleted. So now I think what I need to do is on close, I need to kind of move this around. And I apologize. Again, I don't plan my videos beforehand. I kind of just do stuff live so that my viewers can get like a real sense of like software engineering. But I think what we want to do is if this is set to false, I'm going to call on close. Let's see if that fixes it. So it'll stay open in the background, but when I close out, it'll close. Awesome. Kind of. It almost worked, but not really. It's because I'm manually setting it here, right? So I need to actually say, I want to make a function over here, say function close, which is going to run this, set open of false. And no, actually I'm going to say on close. Let's just do that. Go back to our albums. Let's go to Scuba. Let's move this one to outdoors. Click out to album. It closed them all. All right, so we have some pretty good progress now. We have gallery, albums, and favorites. We have drop downs. We have the modal popping up to add things to different albums, ability to upload. I want to go ahead and commit what I have before we make too much more progress. I'm going to go ahead and say adding image menu, albums, and dialogue. And I think I added the dialogue here. Yep. Go ahead and commit those. All right, so now I think it'd be cool to start diving more into like the generative AI that Cloudinary can provide you in the filtering and various things. So once you have like all your things uploaded to your gallery, it'd be cool if we could have another button here called like edit, right? And take us to like an editing mode or something. Let's try to do that. Let's go and find the menu. We got the image menu here, and I'm gonna go ahead and add another drop-down item called edit. And this is just going to be a link that'll take you to another page. I'll go ahead and make sure I auto import the next link here. href is going to be, we'll call it edit, and then we'll do a image.publicid here. Like that, and I'll just say edit. Now let's make sure this shows up. It'd be nice if we had a pencil icon or something. So let's go up here and see with my icons. Where are the icons? You know, let's just see if I can just add one and see if see what happens. I'll say pencil from Lucid React. Hopefully that's good enough. There we go. We got a little pencil. Class name. We're gonna go ahead and say margin right of 2. And it's a little bit big, so maybe width of 8, height of 8. Let's see if that'll help. Oh, that's too big. Let's go 4. Okay, I'm not sure why it's kind of off. We'll fix this later. I'm not going to waste so much time on making this thing perfect. So if you click on edit, we want to make sure that takes you to an edit page. Now, for some reason, it took you to outdoors. That is not what we want. We want... Oh, okay. Unfortunately, the ID has a slash in it, so that might be a little bit difficult to handle. We might be able to go to an edit page and pass in a query string and then grab that query string for that data. So let's actually try doing that. I'm going to go to edit and then I'm going to put public ID is equal to that. And then we also might want a URL encode. Public ID. I'm actually going to wrap this in an encode URI component. Since it does have a slash in it, I think it'd make more sense to encode it. All right, let's see if I click edit here, it takes us to here. And the idea is that we need an edit page now. So let's go and make a new edit page. I'll make page ESX, export function, edit page. And I do believe we get props here that should have that query string. Let's just print this out and see what happens. Make sure I add default there. I'll just put async as well. All right, so notice here in search params, we get search params public ID. I'm gonna go ahead and just type this whole thing like this. I'll say search params, and we're gonna say public ID. Then over here, we're gonna type it. We'll say search params. We'll say public ID as a string. There, so that will allow us to actually get the public ID, which is here. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab some stuff from the gallery. Let's grab like this whole section thing. That. And we're going to render out edit of public ID. So that will show up in the header. And let's refresh the page and make sure it works. Awesome. A little bit verbose, but it works. So the first thing I want to do is I want to display that image somewhere. I want to display that public image. So what we could potentially do is we're going to have to probably make a new use client component so that we can display that. And this might be a scenario where this actually make more sense with a use client on this entire page. I don't know if we need to do any type of server fetching yet. We'll see. Let's just get rid of the async here, and I'm going to go ahead and just make a Cloudinary, I think it's CID, CLD image like this. We're going to say source is equal to public ID. And I think we need to provide like a width. We'll say 300. Height could be 200. Make sure I auto import that. Oh, alt is missing. So alt is some image. All right, does this show up the image? It does. So now we have the image that we're trying to edit. So some things that you could potentially do to this image would be doing some generative fill. So let's try to start with that. We could add a button, maybe some buttons up here or buttons here, which will kind of like apply some type of editing on this image. All right, let's just go ahead and like add a button that can at least do some generative fill, right? And what generative fill does is it basically takes the outsides of the image and it'll use AI to fill in the blanks, right? So if you wanted to have like a more expansive desert with mountains, you just let AI do its thing and you'll have a cool little image. So how could we potentially do that? Well, we need to have a button over here probably. So I'll just make a button and I'll call it generative fill. Okay, let's make sure we import that from our components, and I'm going to go ahead and say variant is default. That. What does secondary look like? All right. And what we're going to do is when you click on this image, we basically just want to apply some type of transformation and show it over here. So how can we do that? Let's just go ahead and keep track of what filter you're trying to do. And we could just go ahead and put like a const transformation and set transformation equals useState, like this. We'll set it equal to empty for right now. But when you click on these different things, so for example, generative fill, I'm going to say set transformation. I'm going to go ahead and say set transformation generative fill. Okay. Now to make this better, we could probably just type these things. Like we could do an empty string or generative fill, just so we have like better type sense autocomplete. Okay. Maybe undefined would be a better thing to do, undefined. And what I'm trying to do here is when you click on this button, I want to basically show that image over here. So I'm going to say if the transformation is equal to generative fill, then I'm going to show another image on the right. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and we're going to go ahead and just paste in. Let's go over to next cloudinary.dev and let's look at the generative fill. So you basically just need to put fill background, return the given size without, and we'll add some crop of pad. Okay, so we'll do this. And let's see what happens. And before I run that, let's just go ahead and put like a div here that has a grid calls 2 and gap of 12 so that we have space between the two different images that we're showing. All right, so moment of truth. If I click this, it should hopefully show an image over here that has some generative fill. And there you have it. Sometimes AI is hit and miss. So actually, if I went to the gallery and I tried a different image. All right, to test this out, I went ahead and selected this guy. And what my idea is, I'm going to go ahead and try to generate his lower half, like maybe show like his legs or something. If I click generative fill, there you have the AI trying to fill in the bottom half. Obviously, AI can only do so much, but I think that's a good start with the generative fill. Just I do want to note that the generative fill is in beta. So if the results don't look that great, it's because it is in beta. But there are some other cool filters that we could potentially add by just creating some different buttons, right? So let's just go ahead and say like apply generative fill. We could have another one called clear all, and we could just go ahead and have this set to like undefined. And that variant could be give that like a ghost variant. So I can say clear all. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap all of these in some type of grid. I'll say gap of 4. All right, so we do generative fill. We could also apply some different type of styles. So if you wanted to do one, for example, we could potentially do a blur. That might be pretty cool. So let's just go here, get rid of the fill background, the crop, and we're going to say blur is equal to 800. We can add that type over here. All right, let's give that a shot. I think I forgot to add a button for blur. Let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, apply blur. And there you have it. The image on the right will be blurred. What other cool thing is you have zoom and pan, grayscale, pixelate, hint, opacity, trim. Let's just add pixelate and grayscale, but I think you get the picture by now. So gray scale, apply gray. I'll say convert to gray. Go up here and add that as a type. And then down here, we could also just change this to be gray. And we'll say gray scale. I think that's what it was. Yep. Pixelate is another one. All right, so let's do pixelate. And yeah, let's make sure some of these work. So, oh, I'm missing the pixelate button. Go ahead and add that in. All right, let's try this. Here we go. Invert the gray, apply blur, apply generative fill, clear all. So now we have like a really basic page that we can actually like modify these things with filters, and you can get like as experimental as you want. Go through all of their different filters. You can do cropping, you could do image overlays if you wanted to. You could potentially remove the background of images. That might be a cool one to do. So the background removal, I do think you have to turn that on with an add-on. So let's try that out. Let's go over here, and I think you only get a certain amount of these on the free plan. So let's go to the Cloudinary dashboard, and I'll do the Cloudinary AI background removal. So you get 15 monthly edits, so I won't be able to demo this too much, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. All right, so I click this. It says successfully subscribe to Cloudinary's AI background removal. Let's see if this works. Let's go back here. A little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm going to refresh the page, and then I'm going to click on the background removal, and there you have it. Successfully remove the background from this. And if I go ahead and open up in a new image, you can see that his background has been removed. Cool, so good progress. I'm gonna go ahead and commit what we have. We have a lot of cool different transformations here that you can kind of use to edit your images and download them later. So I go here and I'll say add an edit page for transforming images. All right, so one thing I want to fix real quick is this edit button. Notice how these things are like not looking similar, and this also doesn't have like a pointer cursor when you hover over it. So let's go and copy this button right here, and I'm gonna wrap this whole thing in a button, and I'm gonna say as child on the button so that I can put the link inside of it, and that should hopefully give us a link. I would probably also give this a class name of hover or cursor pointer. I'm not sure why by default doesn't have that. All right. And then we need to align it to the left. So I think we could potentially just say text left, and let's see what happens if we do that. All right, that didn't work. So maybe we can give it a flex and say justify start. No? Okay. This one might be a little bit more difficult. So if you look here, the button, the link, and then inside the link it has an SVG in this. So I would think that text left would have moved it to the left. I'm gonna try adding the class to the button itself. Okay, maybe that's what I need to do. All right, so I think it just needs to be moved over, maybe like padding left to 2 and see what happens. No, padding left to 4. There we go. All right, I don't know if that's the proper way to fix that, but I mean, it looks better now, okay? But at this point, I think one thing that'd be really nice to work on is the ability to search your gallery based on images that have certain tags on them, okay? So I may add a search box up here, or maybe even one underneath this, where a user can type in a tag name and it'll filter down to only show the ones that match that tag. So let's go ahead and load up the gallery. And on the gallery page, let's go ahead and open that up. We're going to go ahead and add a search. I'm going to say search form, something like that. And we're probably going to be needing a client component. So let's just make a search form TSX. I'll say use client. I'll say export function search form. And this form needs to return, I mean, we could obviously have it return a form, but we need an input. So we did do an input on the dialog. So let's go to the dialog real quick, and let's just see how we did the input. Go down here. Looks like we just did this. Essentially just grab those two, and I'm going to paste that in here. And then let's just go ahead and auto import that one from the UI label, auto import that from UI input. And then we're going to need some state, right? So let's just go ahead and grab state like this, put it at the top of the search form, and we're going to call this tag name, set tag name. All right, so Go ahead and say search by tag, and then over here, we're gonna just import that in. Let's see if this shows up. We should at least see like an input show up. There we go. I don't like how you can't click on the label. So let's go ahead and say, this will be HTML4 tag name. So when you click on this, it'll actually select the input. And then we probably also want a search button. Okay, so let's add a button down here. We'll say button, and we'll say search. Need to auto import that. Don't forget that. And let's verify if this works. There we go. Now this thing, we probably want to wrap here. I'll say flex like that. So they'll be on the same line. And we also add some gap between them. So I'll say gap of 2. There we go, a little bit of space. Now the idea is that when they search something and press enter, it should basically filter down these to only show things that are matching with tags. So how would we do that? Okay, first of all, we probably want to have an on submit here so that when someone submits the form, we can do something. And I'm just going to go ahead and say prevent default. I'll say type submit here. You don't have to put that, but it does just help it be easier to read through to know that this is a submit button. So what do we want to do? When someone types in an outdoor tag or outdoors and presses search, we want it to basically filter this down. Because the gallery is a React Server component page, it might make sense to actually have this page reload with a query string. So we can say search and then we'll say outdoors. Okay, and then the React Server component could basically rerun and filter down that data for us. So let's try that out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the router here. I'll say const router is equal to use router. Bring in a React navigation. And then over here, I'm going to say router dot replace. And then we are on the gallery. And then I'm going to go ahead and say search by. And then I think it's, make sure you do the encode URL. Let's go ahead and find that. Encode URI component. And we're going to say tag name. Does that make sense? So we're going to replace the URL with gallery search. And then we're going to say router.refresh. That'll tell React to kind of like rerun the React Server component, which should use whatever the search parameter is. And we're going to get that data. So here, we already did a search param, so let's just kind of grab that from another page. Here's a good example of where we did that. So if I were to copy that in, we could get access to the search. Okay, this is going to be a string that's passed in from the query string. And what we need to do is change this expression. So if search is defined, I'm going to say ternary. If it's defined, we want to take this expression. And if you look over here, you do and tags is equal to something. So what we're actually going to do is if this is defined, I'm going to do a ternary, and then I'm going to go ahead and just put over here, I'll say search. If it's defined, we'll do and tags is equal to search. Otherwise, we'll do an empty string. And let's figure out why this is failing. Oh, I got to do another ternary here. Or sorry, I got to do another string interpolation. So not the cleanest, but I mean, I think this will work. So depending on what you put in that query string, it'll actually return you back data that's related to the tag you typed in. So let's try this out. Let's see if this works. I think we do have some tags. I don't remember what we called them. I think we're tagging stuff by favorites. So like we could potentially say favorite and click search. And notice up here, it does add the query string. It does add favorite, but we got some type of error. So let's try to figure that out. What's going on? I think the backend is actually crashing. So let's go to the server. This is expected colon and got tags. So what am I doing wrong? I'm not really sure why this is crashing. Let's go and check another page real quick. And tags equals that. So I don't think it's an actual like issue with the syntax I'm doing. Oh, maybe I need a space here. Let's add a space. That's what's going on. Try it again. Go ahead and refresh and see if it crashes. Okay, now it's working. So I just forgot to add a little space. Simple little human error. Secondly, you'll notice that when this thing loads, it doesn't say favorites here. It probably should put whatever's here inside the default value of the search by tag. So let's go back to the search form, and we're going to have that pass in the initial search. Okay, we'll just go ahead and say search, and let's go and add that. So I'll say initial search, and we'll say initial search is a string, and we're going to pass that in here, and if it's not defined, we'll default to an empty string. All right, so let's try that out. So notice that when I change this, if I say like dog, it does change it to match. Okay, if I go to gallery, that should reset it. Actually, notice it did not reset that. So that's kind of a pain, right? We got to figure out how to get that thing reset. One thing I've noticed that you can do is you can actually use an effect like this. I think we kind of already covered this before, where you can pass in the search. You can pass in initial search. And we can say set tag name is equal to initial search. So if for whatever reason the tag name does change, it'll like clear out. Awesome. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. When you're dealing with React Server components, you kind of have to like do some interesting things when you're mixing React Server components with the client components, because the client component doesn't know when to update, right? It has like a mind of its own, and you have to kind of like use effects to force state things to update when these props are changed. At least that's what I've seen. There might be a better workaround for that, but that's what I've kind of seen with getting this stuff to work. Not a fan of it, but hey, it is what it is. So let's also like maybe over here, like we have this cool ability to search by tag. What we could potentially do is I'm going to show you a cool feature with Cloudinary where you can actually have stuff be auto tagged when you upload it to Cloudinary. So if I actually go to my Cloudinary dashboard, and I think this might actually be, if I go to settings here, remember if we go down to upload, I do believe I created this special upload thing, and if I edit it, I think there's a way to say when stuff is uploaded, I want you to auto tag it with Google tags. Let's see, media analysis and AI. Scroll down. Oh, here it is at the top. So you could potentially define a hard-coded list of tags if you wanted to. If you look here, you can actually do Amazon recognition auto tagging. And I think we could just click save. Now, I don't know if this works by default. I think you might actually have to go enable that. So if we go to add-ons, we have to go to the Amazon recognition. So recognition auto tagging. Let's click this. Now you'll see that you only get 50 monthly ones when you're on the free plan. So we'll hit this pretty quick as we're like uploading things. But let's just go ahead and enable it. Okay. And that should give us access to, like, as we upload images, it should auto tag. We'll have to test this out. I haven't tried it before, but I think it should work perfectly fine. So let's go back to our app and we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm going to add a new picture. This one will be a dog. Let's just find like a dog. And I'm hoping that that is one of the things it'll basically tag with. So let's just go ahead and upload that. I'll do a picture of a dog laying on some rocks. Click upload. And let's actually see what happens if I were to search dog. Wow, pretty cool, huh? Automatically tagged. It looked at the image, it found the object, and it just allows us to search for it. Let's try again with something else. Let's see. I'm sure they have the ability to do cats. Let's just do a cat here. I'll just do a couple of cats too. And keep in mind, this is all going to be dependent on how powerful Amazon's recognition engine can tag things. I do believe, you know, it can only take you so far, right? So let's just go ahead and upload like 2 images of cats, and I'll click save, and then I'm going to say cat, click search, and there you have it. Pretty cool stuff. I like how Cloudinary has like integrations with other powerful AI services like Google tagging, Amazon recognition tagging. It has integration with AI for generation fill. I think it also has like generation edit and crop and stuff like that. One thing I think it'd be cool to do is all the albums we have in our system, we should probably display there, right, as sublinks. And I think having the user to have to click on this and then have to click again, not the best user experience, right? So let's try to add these. In addition to showing up here, we're gonna have them show as subnav links. Okay, shouldn't be too hard, I hope. Let's go to the layout. Remember, this layout page is a React server component. So what that allows us to do is we could potentially, bring in and fetch all of the folders, right? I think, let's try to find where we fetch stuff from Cloudinary. I believe we already do this with the albums. So let's go to albums page and let's grab this code, paste it here. And let's also grab Cloudinary import, paste that there. Now we're going to do async here. And notice that this will give us the root folders, right? So in the layout itself, we're fetching the root folders. You could potentially, if you don't want to do it in the layout itself, because that's going to block the entire page, you could potentially do it inside of a subnav link here if you wanted to. But let's do it here for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and import that from there. So now we should get the folders when this page loads. And again, like I mentioned before, let's just go ahead and loop over them. So let's find the album button, which I do believe is this one. And underneath it, we're going to go ahead and just map over all those folders. And we're going to create more buttons. Okay. And inside those buttons, we're going to add links. And the link is going to be for the folder.name. Okay. And this is going to link, if I can type this correctly, this is going to link to /albums/folder.path. Okay. And save this. I believe this will need a key. I'll just say folder.name. I think it's going to be unique. Probably should say as child so that this will be applied correctly as styling. And then we want to indent this just a little bit. So we know it's like a nested. So I'm going to say class name is equal to padding left of 4. And now if we go back to the app, hopefully, there they go. They show up. Now if I click outdoors, it should take us to the outdoors section. If I click scuba, it takes us to scuba. Now these buttons, I think we should change them to be ghost. So I'll say variant equals ghost. All right. And I don't like how they're like not full width. So maybe we should kind of just copy the existing styles that we have. And then we could do some type of like padding left of 2 or something. Let's see if that helps. That did not help. What about margin left 2? Okay, that is a little bit better. I might do 4. That's also bad because you see on the right, it's like going off the page. So we're going to not do the margin or the padding on here. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to put it inside of here, like on the link itself. I think we could potentially just say this, padding left of 4. Still not liking that, right? Okay. Does that even do anything? Let's try 12. Okay, that was doing something. So I'll do it like 8. Cool. All right, so now it's a better user experience. I mean, you could click albums if you want to view into all these. And potentially, if you wanted to delete an album, we could add that feature. I think this is kind of good enough right now. I'm going to try to add one more thing in. I want to kind of demo a little bit better about the generative AI here. So if I go over to edit, let's pretend like someone wanted to add in some additional things on this image. So right now, if you go to apply generative fill, all it does is kind of expand the image's height a little bit. As you can see, it kind of expanded it. But let's say you wanted to actually change something. Like let's say you wanted to put a person inside of this chair or like remove the chair. We could potentially do that with Cloudinary's AI generative fill. Let's go back to the edit page. And if we go down to the generative fill, so instead of just putting a Boolean for fill background, we can actually give this an object. And we can actually change gravity, prompt, and crop so that we can position things and like add various things to the picture. So if I were to put prompt here, and I could just go ahead and say Christmas tree. I think that's a good example that I've seen. Now, if I were to basically apply the generative fill, let's just refresh the page and I'll click apply generative fill. And I might also increase the width of this a little bit. Just go ahead and 1800, change the height a little bit and click save. Let's see if this will add some type of Christmas tree inside of the picture. There you have it. So it actually added Christmas tree, a fireplace, and a reef. Okay, I just wanted to kind of demo that because I kind of skipped over that part when I was previously making the edit page. And if you wanted to, we could potentially make a input box here so that people can change what the prompt is. So maybe we could do that real quick. If we have this section, I'll give this a flex, and I'll say flex call. And then we're going to go ahead and put that inside of here. I'll do an input. And we want to basically add in a prompt. So I'll say value is equal to prompt. And then over here, I'll say on change, e set prompt e dot current target dot value. And this is off the page. Let me go ahead and do that. And then, of course, we're going to need a little bit of state up here. So I'm going to go ahead and say const prompt set prompt equals use state. And I'll just go ahead and set that as an empty string. Now this thing, it looks like I have a syntax error somewhere. So e set prompt, this needs a parenthesis, and I need to delete that. Okay, cool. So now there's a little prompt here, and also we should probably add some gap between this. It's a little close. And then also a placeholder and a label. So we need to get a label. Do this, and I'll just go ahead and say like prompt. And let's see if this shows up. Okay, so I forgot to hook this into the actual prompt down here. So let's just go ahead and delete that and not have a default as Christmas tree. And I'm going to go ahead and clear all, and I'll click apply generative fill. You know, now that I think about it, this is a generative fill. It doesn't remove, right? So if you wanted to fill in on the right, we could potentially, oh wow, I just added a bed after I deleted that. Let's just go ahead and type in kitchen. I think one thing that's also happening is that like as you type, it's going to keep on making requests to do the generative fill. Maybe that's not the best approach. Maybe we should actually only change the prompt when you click on apply generative fill. So I might actually make a second variable here. I'll call it the pending prompt. And the input will change the pending prompt. And then when you click on this, we're going to actually call set transformation. But then we're going to say set prompt is equal to pending prompt. So that'll only kick off a new image when you have clicked on this button. So if I type in like a Christmas tree, actually I'm going to say a kitchen. And then now when I click it, it should kick that off and change what the image looks like. Now I wish there's a way to add a loader here or a spinner. I'm not really sure how to do that. Maybe that's something you guys can look into. But now that we have a nice little kitchen, they changed this little living room area to an actual kitchen, and it looks pretty cool. To add some finishing touches, I'm going to go ahead and just like create a little icon for this site we're working on. I'm going to go ahead and say a photo album, and we're going to make it, let's make it black. And then I'm going to go ahead and just say create 8 of these. Hopefully we can get a cool looking photo album icon. All right, that's not too bad. I kind of like this one over here. The shadow one's pretty cool too. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just click on remove background. And we're going to take that and we're going to put it as an icon for our application that we're building. And let's go to the header. Let's find the Photos app. I'm going to put a little image here. Now, technically, I could upload this to Cloudinary too, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this a next image. So I'll say image, and we will import this. I'll say source is equal to /album. I think it's a PNG. I went ahead and added it here. So we got an album with no background. And then we're going to go ahead and give this a width of 100, height of 80. You know, I'm going to make it 80. Let's do that. And then we should probably give it an alt icon of this photo album app. All right, so let's see if it shows up. There it is. It's a little big. I might actually reduce this to 50/50. And I'm going to say WebDev Cody. Rename it to WebDev Cody Photos. How about that? So I think this is as far as I'm going to take this application. We added a decent amount of features, all from using purely Cloudinary. I didn't make any secondary database. I'm just using all of the Cloudinary supported APIs to do queries, to do inserts, the widgets for uploading, the ability to favorite and stuff. That's all added with just tags, and albums are added with the public prefixes of the images. So as you can tell, Cloudinary has tons of different things you can do with images. I'm just going through here, you'll start to see like how much they actually support. And then they also have tons of add-ons, as you saw, where you can actually do various AI related things with your images. And on top of what I didn't even show you how to do videos. You can upload videos to Cloudinary as well. They have a bunch of features that are built into doing video transcriptions. You can do video tagging. Ultimately, I would say if you need a good place to store all your media assets like images and videos, and you need a robust way to query over those, manage them, tag them, go check out Cloudinary. I had a lot of fun building this application, and I was actually surprised I was able to build all this without bringing in Postgres or any type of database. Some final thoughts, if you actually wanted to practice building onto this application, some things I would probably do is I would add a load more button or some type of like lazy scroll. So as you scroll more, it would fetch more, which means that you may actually want to like convert this to just a client component from the get-go, because I think the pagination and dynamically loading in more images might be kind of more difficult with the React Server components. I think the ability to delete albums would be kind of useful. Right now, when you have an album, there's no way to delete it. Which means that you basically have to loop through all the images and move them to your base gallery. And I'm sure there's some other things that you could probably look into. Also, like authentication. I do believe Cloudinary provides you a way to do pre-signed URLs. So like if you need to actually authenticate these images so that no one can just view them, there are ways to create signed URLs on your API so that these images will only show up for certain users that are attached to their account. All right, that wraps it up. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new about Cloudinary. Like always, I have a Discord channel that you're welcome to join if you want to find a place to hang out or ask other developers questions if you're stuck on anything. Other than that, have a good day and happy coding.